give a little intro to Chris, and then we're just going to get right into it and just pick a video game and talk about it. So, welcome, Runemeister Chris. Chris is a professional CRM archaeologist. CRM, for those who don't know, is Cultural Resource Management. It's essentially the salvage archaeology version in America and other places. But he's also an archeo gamer who has been building an online platform dedicated to creating entertaining content catered towards reaching an audience of non-archaeologists and piquing their interest in history. He received a bachelor's degree in archaeology and a master's of research in Viking archaeology. He's worked at the Smithsonian Institute in DC, Cahokia Mounds UNESCO World Heritage Site, and at numerous engineering companies on energy sector projects around the US. In addition to providing guest lectures in Glasgow, St. Louis, and on a medievalist archeo gaming conference this past summer. For over 3 years, he has been streaming here on Twitch, editing videos for YouTube, and creating short-form content on TikTok based primarily around his special interest of Viking Age archaeology, and how Vikings, medieval fantasy, and archaeology in general are represented in video games, tabletop role-playing games, and public media at large. Everyone, welcome Chris. Oh, where's my applause? I actually have.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited for this chat. This is like, I don't get a lot of opportunities to do things super professional. And I mean, you can tell, I don't know if you could tell, I hold myself to high professional standards.
That's okay. That's fine.
I'm excited to be here and chat with everybody today.
It's kind of like half professional, half not professional, because I know we're going to get on tangents, because that's just how archaeologists
Well, that happens. That's what it is.
But it's just cool, because I want to just, like, there are a couple obviously history gamers and there are a couple archeo gamers, but it's really great to have somebody who is very, very similar to me in the sense that you tend to focus a lot of your games around Viking archaeology and Viking history, like I do with Egypt. And so I just love that, because like a lot of the archeo gamers, like there's the people who play like Lara Croft and like Indiana Jones games, or just play any history game, even if they don't have like a particular knowledge base or interest in that history. And I just really like the nice focus, because I feel like we're just very similar in that aspect. So, who wants to go first? I can go first.
I guess you can go first. Yeah, you go first.
All right. So I kind of separated the games that I was going to talk about today into Egyptology games and archaeology games. And the one thing I'll say is that the Egyptology games are explicitly are games that are taking place during ancient Egyptian times, rather than a archaeologist or treasure hunter interacting with an Egyptian site. I kind of stuck those more in the archaeology because it's more, that's the problems with those are more the archaeology side than the Egyptology side. So I also kind of separated them by like good, okay, and bad. So I'll just say one of the good ones, and one of the good ones we'll just start it off with is Assassin's Creed Origins. Assassin's Creed Origins I have found to be a very well-rounded way to talk about ancient Egypt and to set something in ancient Egypt. I have my own little tiny quips about it, and in general, I am not a picky person. Like, there are people who get really picky about history stuff and like costuming and stuff. I am not that person. Like, I really like, I think I understand the more marketing and the way that video games and popular sources, like how long it takes to develop these things, and I'm like, I know you're not going to hire a random Egyptologist to actually translate something. I am not expecting that of you. Like, and that's kind of the thing, is that
would be nice though.
It would be. Oh my god, it would be nice. And we know Assassin's Creed Origins did hire some Egyptologists in certain aspects to do things for the game, and so I appreciate that step, even if they didn't go the full Monty. Like, I appreciate whatever kind of they did for it, because it kind of just that kind of is not common, and Assassin's Creed has the budget, and that is the only thing I really like kind of expect.
That is true.
Yeah.
They do have a heck of a budget.
They have the games, they have the platform, that they have the ability to do that. I find Assassin's Creed to have so much. It is like, I will say the time period that the game takes place in is not my forte, so there were some things that I struggled with just trying to understand if it is historically accurate, because I just don't know that time period as much. But from what I could see, it did a really great job at representing Egyptian architecture, actual monuments. Like, they weren't making up random monuments and random places. Like, they were using all real places in ancient Egypt. Frequently we're using the ancient Egyptian name for places, which is not common, and you will see that in the okay and bad ones that I talk about, that they don't do that. But I also just think it was just really good to show the daily lives of the Egyptians, because you could just go to any random little town and just see people doing what they would have done, and that was what I really liked about it. And the funniest thing, which I may have told this story on stream, but I can't really remember, is a couple years ago I went to the National Geographic Museum in DC, and they were doing an exhibit called Queens of Egypt. It's one of my favorite museums. I've been to every Egypt exhibit they've been doing, I've been going to. And they did this Queens of Egypt exhibit, mainly focusing, I think, on 4 more likely New Kingdom queens. But there were these large, like, moving pictures on certain walls kind of throughout the exhibit. They weren't really, it wasn't on a TV screen, it was just literally like projected onto a wall. And it really wasn't a movie, because it was kind of, you couldn't really see it, but it was kind of repeating, like it was kind of circling. And for example, there was one where it was looking out over the Nile and the little black cat would walk along and you'd just see the water moving. And there was one of a temple of like the kind of Holy of the Holies and these priests like bowing down in this like dark aspect. And one of the bigger ones was a person walking through Deir el-Medina, which Deir el-Medina is a city during the New Kingdom that essentially was established to hold artisans who were building and decorating the tombs of the Valley of the Kings. And so it's a very interesting community, and only made up of like very skilled people. And so it was this little walkthrough. And I remember looking at this and saying, National Geographic has a lot of money. And this was also put on by the Turin Museum in the Turin Egyptian Museum in Italy. And I was like, National Geographic has a lot of money. I don't know if they have this much money. Because I looked at it very instantly and was like, there's something off about this. Like, it's not a movie. It's not like, and this is pre what I would consider AI.
Was it like an AR experience?
I don't know. And I was literally looking at it and I was like, it looked like something. It wasn't a picture and it wasn't a video, so it had to be some sort of augmented reality. But I couldn't, in my mind, I looked at it and instantly said, I think this is a video game. And one of the things that confirmed it was a video game is the image with the black cat. The cat was walking over these rugs that were stacked on top of each other. And when it started to walk over one of the rugs, the whole cat kind of lifted up slightly and walked over and still moved. But I noticed that just that little piece. Energy. I was like, that's video game. And essentially what I did was I ended up buying their like exhibition catalog, and I scrolled through it, and they actually had pictures of that moving image. And I looked in the very bottom, it's Assassin's Creed Origins.
Wow.
That they weren't exact scenes that I immediately would recognize from Assassin's Creed Origins, but like it was enough that they, I don't know, I guess they contracted out to them to make these scenes.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just so great, because especially the Deir el-Medina one, because you were walking through a city and you were just seeing people. And that was such a great way to integrate a great game, and a game that is really as authentic as it's going to be, integrating it into a museum space and making it educational, which I always thought was very cool. And the big thing with the Assassin's Creed, the latest games, is the Discovery Tours. The Discovery Tours, They did not have to do. Like, those were not necessary. Those were extra things that they did not have to do, but they did it. And it shows a lot of like how much they care about actually portraying real history. Because obviously, without fully spoiling Assassin's Creed Origins, I've always described Origins as, and this is kind of, I think, frequently with most Assassin's Creed games, it is a Forrest Gump plot, in which amazing. This is I've done this a lot of times, and it's the weirdest thing, but
it's okay. I'm on board. I'm here for it.
It's a story where the main character, who is a pretty much virtual nobody, has interacted and changed all of these huge historical events. So the two big examples I use for it is most of the Assassin's Creed games tend to be in a large point of history. Like the current Mirage is during the Anarchy of Samara, which we'll talk about tomorrow. But I didn't realize that the person that Basim assassinates in the very beginning of the game was literally assassinated in real life. I was like, whoa. That was in my research yesterday. I was like, oh, that's what this is that he's the person who does it. And then there's also a movie or a TV show that I've seen called Rome by HBO, and that is very much that same kind of plot where it's just two random Roman centurions who suddenly become so integrated with Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, Mark Antony, everybody. And I like those plots. I like that because it's kind of like it's a way to integrate it into history without also potentially ruining an actual historical person's or name or reputation or changing that.
Right.
Because there's so many characters that, like, Anne Boleyn gets done all the time, and it's every single one is different. And how do we know, like, how do we really know that's how she was or anything like that? And so I kind of like this aspect where you're just this kind of background character, and, like, it's just, you're just kind of fiddling back and through and such. So the only things about Assassin's Creed Origins that get me a little bit are what was the thing? Oh, so, and I've talked about this a couple times, is that I don't think it was the best time period for them to choose. I understand why they chose it, but there's a frequent trope that I find in modern scholarship, or at least not even modern scholarship, but like popular culture about ancient Egypt, that if something first occurs in the Greco-Roman period, the last period of ancient Egyptian history, that people assume it happened the entire time of ancient Egyptian history. When the Greco-Roman period is one of the first melting pots of society, where it is bringing in so much culture, so many ideas, so many different people together. The best example, which I've told my followers before, is that there was literally an article that somebody sent me about how bowling was invented in ancient Egypt. And that was the title. Like, the title was Bowling was invented in ancient Egypt. But when you look down, it was an archaeological site dating to Greco-Roman Egypt, and honestly, even more Roman Egypt, that looked like a long lane with these pins or things at the end. It did look like bowling. It probably was, I don't know, who knows. But how do we know the ancient Egyptians invented it versus the Greeks or Romans bringing it there? Like, we don't. And so I think I've posed some other ideas for when Assassin's Creed or Origins should have taken place. Like, New Kingdom is definitely possible. Like, there's the harem conspiracy where Ramses III gets murdered. Like lots of interesting other times. And I feel like they picked this because it was fairly easy to have a villain, which is the Romans.
Right.
Because otherwise, all the different encampments are also going to be Egyptians, and you as a Medjay, as a, like, essentially a policeman, a kind of vigilante or whatever, it'd be complicated.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, and so I understand why they did it, but I kind of wish it was set in real pharaonic Egypt. The other thing, what was the other thing? And the other thing is truly that they should have had Aya be the main character, and that is pretty much nothing against ancient Egypt. It's truly that against the sexism of the developers at the time, because why would they? You play as her literally twice, and you play as her in the last scene of the actual story, and yet she's not the main character, and it's so annoying to me because it's so obvious she was supposed to be. But otherwise, that was one other thing was they did such a good job with ancient Egyptian architecture and including real pyramids, real cities, and yet they didn't do, for those pyramids, they most of the time did not do the actual interior proportions or rooms of the pyramids.
Right.
The Great Pyramid being the best example, where there's a small portion that looks like it, but there's actually not. There's a huge cavern underneath it, and they did it because there's a chase scene. Essentially, you're fighting one of the people of the cult, and you're chasing them in, and you find this huge cavern like underneath the Great Pyramid, and I'm like, we have mapped this pyramid so many times. We know
it's all right there.
It's all right there. And granted, I will say they did have there is a secret entrance that actually is very close to where there now is a secret chamber that we have found since then.
Oh.
But like, and actually they even talk about it in the Discovery Tours, because when the game came out, the theory of it was already, I think, around. But they only just confirmed that like much more recently. But yeah, just like little things like that where it's just like, I don't think that was that hard to change it.
Yeah.
Like why make a secret treasure room full of treasures and not just like, you can make a secret treasure room, just make it attached to the actual interior plan. Treasure I guess in my head, like it's not that hard. But in overall, I think it is the best one to represent Egyptian culture, ancient Egyptian culture, and the general vibe that you're gonna need. And the temples look very accurate. They all have kind of duplicate designs on them, but I don't expect them to do a new design for every single temple in the entire map. But yeah, That's my thoughts of it.
It's definitely a good example.
Yeah.
And do you want me to come back with Assassin's Creed Valhalla?
If you would like to.
Absolutely. Okay, here I have some spicy opinions on Valhalla.
I'm great.
And I'm sorry.
I just want to know, have you played Origins?
I did not play Origins.
And
the only other Assassin's Creed I've played was Black Flag.
Oh, okay.
Which is really good, and really Black Flag is just like later themed Vikings. It's just
yeah, it's pirates.
Pirates are just Renaissance Vikings, but or like late stage Vikings. But so I didn't finish Valhalla. I started playing it and I couldn't finish it. I was not into it that much. Mm-hmm. Hades came out like right after, and I got really into Hades. That's a separate issue. Yeah. But I do have some pros and cons regarding Valhalla. The way that I separated my games, by the way, was I separated them by genre. So I'm like, let's talk about like the action Viking games. Let's talk about the RTS Viking games, and let's talk about just in general how they're represented.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so in terms of the action games, Valhalla, one thing I liked about it, I'll start with the good.
Yes.
The good for Valhalla, I like how they represented the domestic, maybe like the domestic or the day-to-day life of somebody from medieval Scandinavia. Mm-hmm. Like one thing that's very difficult to do in a Viking video game, I put that in quotes, I'll talk about that later. But but the one reason why I think it's tough to do that is because the Vikings are very, I hesitate to say like bipolar, but like they have two very opposing elements to their culture that are hard to represent in a video game. You have the settlers and the farmers and the craftsfolk, the people who are just trying to get by in a medieval lifestyle in a part of the world that is not that easy to get by in, and they're making their movements, their settlements, and then like once a year when raiding season rolls around, they're like, okay, time to go murdering, and they just kind of ship out and they start doing these like wildly violent and unforgivable crimes, which are oftentimes very like romanticized and blown up, and make great fodder for video games. And I think what Assassin's Creed Valhalla does is really kind of show the balance of like, this is the life that they're leading, this is why they lead it this way, and this is why they do what they do. It kind of highlights, it's less about like, we're just like, for glory and honor, we got to go fight for no reason. And it's like, we got to do this if we're going to get enough food. Yeah. we got to eat. Like, it's like, they really kind of they get the motivations for it pretty down. I really liked that. I liked how, you're on with the boat, you get the boat, you go up a river, you hit a town, and you move on. And it's like, it's not quite that simple all the time, but that's definitely more so than a lot of these other ones. And so I do like that element. I did have my problems. Number one, with it was just hard to get past some of the, I know that we were talking about like the need for historical accuracy in games and the not need for it. I think Assassin's Creed is also so strange in that they can simultaneously create such like beautiful and accurate set and prop pieces, while then being like, but then aliens. Like, wait a minute. Well, rein it in. But so like they create such a weird dichotomy with that stuff too, that it was jarring for me. I also, and I tried to find a picture of it and I couldn't. So I am going to say this maybe requires a fact check.
Gotcha.
But when I played it, I remember playing it on stream and talking to people in chat about this. But there's this one thing that they do in Norway before you come over, where the village towns at the foot, like they have a little walkway that comes to the main drag, and then at the end of the walkway they have like little rune stones that they put as like house markers or like mailboxes or something. And when I looked at one, I noticed that if I was seeing it correctly, which I'm pretty sure I was, it was the Yelling runestone.
Okay.
Which again, I don't have a picture. It's a Danish runestone dating to like the mid 900s, specifically raised by a king of Harold Bluetooth, and it's like a mortuary stone that has three sides. One side is an inscription saying like, "Oh, I raised this stone in honor of my father Gorm, and my mother Thyri, and yada yada yada." And then on the other side, he has a big like artistic beast motif that's very common in Scandinavian art. And then on the third side is actually a very Nordic-inspired crucifix scene, like a Christ hanging on a cross. And his whole thing was that he was one of the first Danish kings to become Christian. And he united Denmark and Norway and made the Danes Christian.
Gotcha.
This is also the same Bluetooth who Bluetooth headphones are named after.
Oh.
And Ludo in chat is confirming that I am right about this, so I'm very glad.
Okay.
But yeah, I saw that, and I like literally had to take a walk.
and
I
why?
was like,
is that wrong time period, wrong
so
place?
it was wrong for a number of reasons.
Okay.
Number one, yes, time period was wrong. The runestone itself was raised by a Danish king in like 950-ish.
Okay.
Like general mid 900s.
Yeah.
And the game was taking place at the very beginning of the Viking Age, so like late 700s.
And I was gonna say 900 is
so
when Mirage is taking place, but over in Iraq. Okay.
Yeah. So we're looking at about like at least a 150 year difference here. Number two, the size is completely wrong. They made this like a knee-high stone when this one's like person-sized.
Yeah.
And then number three, the context is just completely off. There's no reason that a runestone should even be in that location.
Yeah.
Runestones were used as mortuary markers, bridge markers, land claims. Like there were a number of different, and I mean, maybe you can make an argument for the land claim, but to my knowledge, they're not really individualized on that level. Yeah. It's not like somebody had a runestone outside their house to be like, this is Ivar's house. You know, it wasn't really like that.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Valhalla start is Valhalla start at 870?
Yeah, because I forgot about this.
In.
So the whole thing is that Basim is obviously in Valhalla. So Basim is in Valhalla, and it only takes place 12 years before Valhalla. But the reason I said 900 is because I was doing all the research of the Abbasid period, and that is generally 800 to 900. And then eventually to 1200. So I was focusing on the 900, but yeah, I read that essentially it's only a 12-year difference between the movie or between the two games because Basim is in both of them.
Yeah, and yeah, I guess Valhalla would be in the 800s because it was Great Viking Army, which would have been.
Yeah, I can understand
that makes a lot more sense.
Point though, especially when they drop a specific artifact, I can understand that. This did just remind me that the bust of Nefertiti is in the tomb of Nefertiti, which is not also a real thing, and I let it go because it's part of the second DLC in which you fight 4 pharaohs, and you fight Tutankhamun, Akhenaten, Ramses the Great, and Nefertiti, and I was kind of fine with including her because she's awesome, but there is a genuine theory that she was not Nefertiti, but that she was after her husband died, she was a pharaoh for a short time called Neferusapaten, I think is that full name.
Oh, okay.
There are two really, in between Akhenaten and Tutankhamun, there are 2 pharaohs' names that we have evidence of, but we can't really place them where they are. One is Neferusa Potson, I think is how you say it, and then one is Semenkhare. And we don't know who they are. We don't know. They kind of drop off the face of the earth so quickly. And so,
fun side fact: Akhenaten is my favorite pharaoh.
Akhenaten is my. So I don't say Akhenaten is my favorite pharaoh anymore. It's technically Amenhotep III, his dad, but it's really Akhenaten. I really still love Akhenaten. Amarna will always be my favorite, like it will. And I think I tried to just move away from it because it is like the gateway drug to ancient Egypt is usually the Amarna period. Like it's the weird one. It's the period that's not like anything else, and so it brings people into Egyptology very frequently. So I was trying to be cool and not do it, but it is still my favorite.
You can't fight the facts.
Yeah, and the way that they did that, the second DLC is so amazing in certain ways, but also like it's not inaccurate because it's not real things. It's all talking about the afterlife and stuff, but the way they do it is just like to me, it makes a lot of sense because I put a lot of personality into who the pharaohs are. So, like, Nefertiti's is the Field of Reed, so it's this beautiful, like, reed palace with these giant scorpions that will kill you if you get anywhere close to them. And Tutankhamun's is kind of this dark, spooky place, but it's, like, kind of pretty in a way. Ramses the Great is this absolute desolate land with massive statues of himself and the Battle of Kadesh, which he loses. And so it's, like, I hate to say it, he's such a selfish kind of person in his mind, so it's like that battle and that loss is going to weigh on his mind all the way throughout the afterlife. So like that makes so much sense to me. And then Akhenaten is his palace. So it's this huge, beautiful palace, and then there's literally the Aten in the sky. Yeah. But they didn't include the tiny hands, and that made me very upset.
That's a bummer.
They lost it. It would have been perfect for the tiny hands to come out at the end of the sun rays. But the bust of Nefertiti is in Nefertiti's tomb. I don't care that it's in Nefertiti's tomb because I think there is still a possibility that one day we might find her tomb, but that's not where the bust was. The bust was in Amarna. Yeah. We know where the bust was. It's a cute Easter egg, but it's not that.
And that's, I think, what they were going for here. They were trying to be like, oh, let's take a runestone that people will recognize and put it in the game and show that we did our research. And it's like, what you're showing is like, that you Google searched runestone.
But you did it wrong.
You put the wrong stone in there. Not that there's a right stone in a situation like that, but you got to just kind of make one up. And I mean, just having it out of context like that was particularly jarring for me. So like there are certain... And that's a recurring theme that I've noticed, not just in video games, but in pop culture at large, especially regarding Vikings. A lot of people focus very intently on how does it look, without paying attention to where does it belong, you know? And I mean, this was something that we saw in like the Vikings TV show and Northmen and you know, all of these different shows that highlight medieval Scandinavians are like, oh yeah, we have these artifacts that are direct copies of real artifacts and they're gorgeous and they're beautiful. But they're not always in the right place or in the right time period or in the correct usage. And it's like, yeah, it looks good, but it's missing all the meat. You know what I mean?
But the Jesus side forward.
It is what it is.
Incorrect. Yeah, I found one of the little things...
The Jesus side forward, that's also frustrating.
Yeah. One of the things that I always found just slightly frustrating about Origins, and it wasn't totally noticeable most of the time, was there was this one part that is a huge mummification temple, where like mummification is going, and it's in the Discovery Tour, and you can go through it, and it gives you all the steps. It's very accurate. It's very cool. The thing that annoyed me so much is that they had coffins just like lying everywhere, like just kind of in preparation, waiting for mummies. But they had probably about at least 1,000 years of different styles of coffins hanging out in the same room. Because by the Greco-Roman period, most of them are these portrait mummies, which like you may have seen are these flat portraits that are kind of installed into the actual mummy, and then they often don't even have a coffin like around them. It's mostly that. But there's one that's a direct ripoff of Tutankhamun's coffin, and I'm just like, what are you doing sitting next to this? Like that's a 1,000-year difference, my man. And it's
all of these things are not like the other.
Yeah, it's like pick one of them. Pick one of them because I know one of them will be more accurate. And you're right. It's that they find things that look cool and then they put them everywhere. But I would definitely, one of the things I do appreciate about the particular time period that Origins had was that there's a clip of it that I think on my Twitch of me finding this, is that I walk into an Egyptian house somewhere totally random, and I turn around and there's a mummy portrait on the wall, and there is a theory that prior to putting them on the mummies, they'd be hung on the wall. And
oh, that's cool.
I was like, whoa, that's
very
great.
cool.
And then I looked at it and I said, I've seen this one. This one's in Baltimore. I've seen this one in person. And so like it was really cool to actually see some actual pieces. And like those are fine. Like they're like, we don't know, many of them we don't know the names of people. We don't even have the mummies attached to them because early archaeologists love to rip them off and fuck
that's
them.
fine.
And yeah. And so but I loved little things like that, but then sometimes they do it and it's bad. And it's just like
it's real hit and miss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you would you say, like, I know you said you got disinterested from Valhalla because other cool games were coming out. Was it was another portion of that because you didn't like the vibe of it, or was it just more because to be honest, one of my
definitely
friends,
other elements of it were. So I think a combination of things was I was very early in my streaming career.
Yep.
And that game was very time consuming. And I think that I wanted to play a lot more games, and and focusing all of my time on playing a single player game that I was only playing like once or twice a week was losing my personal interest because I wasn't playing it enough. Second, like I struggle with the Assassin's Creed gameplay. Just in general, the gameplay style is not super for me.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the games that I play, I just don't like those as much. And then there were those like weird things that were kind of thrown in every now and then that I'm just like,
because to be honest,
I mean, it's usually one of those things where I'm usually pretty forgiving when it comes to people representing Vikings or representing certain elements of archaeology in their games, because the point to me isn't so much to get it 100% historically accurate, it's to get people asking questions. So if people are doing something like that and then they're going, oh wow, like I want to learn a little bit about that, or like, oh, that's really cool, like I wonder if it's like, is it really like that, and they're typing it in and then they're getting the real answer. That's what I love. That's what I love about these games, and that's what I love about utilizing certain video games as, you know, teaching tools and as catalysts for conversation. Absolutely. Because you can get that sort of drive going. So Valhalla does have that going for it.
That's good.
But I think that the game, it was just not my style of game, which sucks because it is like, it's very cool and it's very on brand.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. The two other ones that I was going to talk about that are in the good category are not my style of game, and everyone kind of knows that I hate them, but I did play them a little bit.
Right.
Because I played Assassin's Creed Origins. That was the first game I started playing on stream. 3 years ago.
Okay.
Literally next week. And I was only playing it once a week.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I was only playing it once a week. It took me pretty much a full year to complete the story, or maybe not a full year, a couple months to complete the story. And then when I started the second DLC, it got so hard that I was like, I don't like to be mad on stream. So we took a couple months break on that one because Tutankhamun was kicking my ass and I was not happy about it. Right. But now it's so hard because I've done that and Odyssey, and those are very similar gameplay, although they have their differences. But now Mirage is going back to the old style of game, and I hate it. It's like,
oh no,
it's not fighting based, which I'm not. Like, prior to streaming, I was not a video game person besides Animal Crossing. Like that was at the height of my video game talents. So it was a huge learning curve to learn those two games, and now we're going back to sneaking and not fighting.
Well, you probably like Valhalla then, because Valhalla is a lot more tanky.
And one of my friends who has played Valhalla, truly, like, she just said she was just so bored. Like she just got, she's like, it wasn't the time period for me. Like it was
missing a lot of direction. I got to a certain point where like I'm doing the story campaigns and then they just kind of stop telling me what to do. They're like, hey, it's an open world game, like go off and do raiding. And I'm like,
no.
Well, what about the army? Like, what are we doing? And it wasn't like showing me where to go in the campaign. And like, you know, it's one thing to have an open world game and like try and avoid railroading stuff. But for Assassin's Creed games, those are more, like to me, they come across as more story driven.
Yes.
And sometimes it's important to have railroads when you're doing a story driven game because you can't, because you gotta get the story across. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You gotta kind of pick which one you're gonna do.
Yeah. I much appreciate the story versus anything.
Yeah.
Because it if it doesn't have that, and unfortunately I think that's the games, a lot of the other Egyptology games I've played don't have that story aspect, and so I just get bored really quickly. That kind of leads into the two other games I was going to talk about next, that are they're in my good category. They are nowhere near my favorite games we've played on stream, because like some of the ones that are in the okay section I like way more than these. So the two games I was going to talk about are well, technically 3 games, but I've only played one, or I've only played 2 of them. There's a series called Pre-Dynastic Egypt and Old Kingdom Egypt.
Okay.
And they are strategy-based games, and they're not even like, so the other one that I can't really talk about as much because I haven't played it is Total War Pharaoh. Total War Pharaoh looks insane. I did a guest stream for Sasa, and I was the guest person, and I was watching it, and I was like, I already know this is not my game.
This looks great.
This looks right. But then
that's a real-time strategy, right? So it's like a top-down city builder, army builder.
Yeah. And that one is taking place, like specifically that one is taking place during what time period it was, like set like the New Kingdom when they're conquering. So it's a lot of conquering. But the other thing is that you can pick your main person, which is not going to be historically accurate and stuff. So like the game that I was playing, they were playing as Seti the First's wife, and she was allied with Seti, but they were eventually going to conquer Seti, and I was like, oh, okay. But they were throwing out good names and good ancient Egyptian city names and stuff, but like not my type of game. Pre-Dynastic Egypt and Old Kingdom Egypt are a simpler version of this, but are a little bit still strategy game. Nothing's really going on. I only played Pre-Dynastic Egypt. I probably should have played Old Kingdom Egypt because at least there would be something exciting. There's not really anything going on in Pre-Dynastic Egypt because you're literally creating Pre-Dynastic Egypt. And like it's like you have a certain set of turns, if I remember correctly, and you have to kind of conquer certain things and get trading and make sure that you're distributing all your people in different areas to be able to farm, and then you're also bringing up the beginnings of religion, and like all of this kind of stuff. And so it's just like a lot. There's like a lot going on, but it is pretty explicit and talks about the whole process. It talks about all the pre-dynastic cities. It's naming them by the Egyptian name, which I go back and forth on, because like I appreciate that you've done the research and you have the Egyptian name, but also the public may not know that that's the Egyptian name. They may only know it from the Greek or Roman name. So like
so they're not going to know the difference.
They're not going to know that they might think this is a fictional city when it's not. So that's like Waset is Thebes, and like Thebes is the modern name that the Greeks gave it, and now the city is Luxor. And so it's like I understand, but it's like okay, like putting the actual name would help you educate, and maybe having the ability that they should mention both.
Or like toggle it or parentheses it or something.
I think that would be helpful, or at least have it in some sort of wiki that comes along with all the parts of the game and stuff. But
it's not as easy to pinpoint the original Egyptian name compared to like York and Jorvik.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, there like
or you kind of get the idea.
A good amount of the Wikipedia page will sometimes have an Egyptian name, but there's literally like one book that I really want that's like Egyptian names of cities. It's like this really stupid expensive book, and I really want it because I know there are some that the other thing is that they don't often have the hieroglyphs for those names. They'll have the way you say it, but I can't sometimes you can backtrack into a dictionary, but it's not as common.
It's
not
tough.
as easy. If you just have the pronunciation of it, because guess what? We don't know how the ancient Egyptians pronounced anything.
Yeah, vowels weren't written, right?
No. They have an A and like an I sound, but that's kind of it. And like there are many words that don't have either of those monoliterals, and so we don't know how they said it. And like that's the thing that I kind of let Assassin's Creed Origins have, is because people are talking in Egyptian constantly, and I'm just like, I'm not even gonna kind of jump this hill because I don't know the answer to it either.
That's too big an issue.
Exactly. It's just you do you whatever, whoever you talk to, they can do that. I'm not gonna really say anything.
Right.
But yeah, the big thing is that there's no real story aspect of this game. Like, you're kind of going in chronological, but you're going in chronological for like a really short time period where not a lot happens. And that's mostly because I played Pre-Dynastic. If I'd played maybe Old Kingdom, maybe I would get more interesting with all the pyramids and I would recognize pharaohs, but
yeah, I could see that.
There's so many people there's so many pharaohs and small rulers that we sort of know a little bit about in Pre-Dynastic Egypt, but it's like,
right.
You don't know.
So along that same vein of game,
a
couple of the ones that I had picked out to talk about in terms of like a genre was Crusader Kings 3, as well as Age of Empires and Age of Mythology.
Oh yeah,
which are kind of like
I've been
bastard
told that
cousins of each other.
Yeah.
The Age of Empires 2 was like one of my core games as a child growing up. I played that all the time.
Yeah.
And it definitely had a contributing factor. And then Age of Mythology was basically the same game mechanically, only instead of doing like historical city building, you were doing mythological. So you had like monsters and gods and demigods and heroes, and you had different figures from myth. And Age of Mythology was Norse, Greek, and Egypt, and then a DLC added Atlantean.
Which of course it did.
Yeah, which was basically just like reflavored Greek. But it was fun. Yeah, because that's what they are.
That's what they are.
Yeah. But so it was a very fun game, and that one was not really built for the history. That was like myths, like you followed in the sagas. But the Age of Empires games have campaign modes where you follow in the campaigns and like the battles of major historical figures. I think the France one in Age of Empires 2 is probably the most popular, the most well done. It follows the campaign of Joan of Arc. And you basically just like go from one city to the next through Europe as you're just like conquering people with French military. But there are Vikings in that game as well, and they do utilize like a little bit of Viking storytelling, which is fun. But it's cool because it kind of dips your feet into some of those subjects, like using long ships they have the long ships as a custom unit, and Huskarls as a custom unit, as like, Huskarls being kind of like, I guess like lieutenants or something. And they were kind of like headmen for the Jarl.
I was gonna say that
like
sounds similar
they call
to
it the House Carl.
It's basically like the house soldier of the word Medjai. Medjai is like
similar.
The closest way we've kind of defined it is sort of like policemen. Or sort of mercenary, but not really. Maybe on that.
These guys were like a trusted person.
But
like
that's cool that they use those words. I did most of the time they're not getting Medjai right, but like I like that they would take a word that and get the closest to what we think it is.
Yeah. But these real-time strategy games, they don't tend to lean more into that storytelling element, apart from Age of Empires, which actually does a pretty good job of it. They're all about like the battles and the strategy and the structures. So they do a pretty good job of showing how some of the structures might have been built. And what I really liked about Crusader Kings 3, though, I had a very long ongoing campaign. I technically never beat it. I just kind of I fell off with it.
That's
what
my next game I'm going to talk about is that I don't. I'm
I had a very long running dynasty of Norse leaders who were conquering Scandinavia. And that game is a lot more political intrigue, so it's a lot more like making alliances, talking to people, rather than like you do a lot of battling and stuff, but it's on a different degree. And Crusader Kings added a Northlands DLC. I think it's Northlands or something. But it's very specifically content devoted to the Scandinavian cultures.
Okay.
So what they did was they added in certain trigger events and things that can happen to you if you are playing a Scandinavian nation.
Gotcha.
So things like, you conquered this territory. Do you want to raise a runestone there in memory of it to help generate population interest? Or like, cool. You're going out on a hunting event, and like you run into these types of things. Like they added new triggers to the game, new events, new things that really honed in on Scandinavian culture specifically, which was very neat. I didn't play it the normal way. I only played it with the DLC. So seeing it with that, maybe I don't know what the differences are 100% with the old stuff.
Yeah.
But the game itself, while yes, Beards, you're right, it is extremely heavy-handed with micromanagement and strategy, but it does kind of tie more into those cultural themes. You're looking less at just bonking people, and you're looking at the other nuances that go into creating this sort of medieval culture,
Yeah.
which I thought was really fun.
It
and
sounds
really
more of
intriguing.
a civilization builder than a military or city building. Or
It is. It's very much like
storyline.
conquer the world is the goal.
Yeah. that's
Ally
very cool.
and marry off children until you get until you get everything, kind of thing.
That sounds very cool. Yeah, and that
Yeah, it's an interesting game.
I think I like that, just having that aspect that at least feels
Oh,
like
it's very
you're not
difficult. I do want to get that across. It is extremely tough. You get backstabbed all the time.
Oh,
There's
no.
like everything goes
I
downhill
I
real
already
quick in that
know
game.
strategy games.
It's a mess.
Anything that doesn't have a
Yeah.
story is just not my type of game. I
Right.
I don't like being mad on stream, and this brings in the next game I was going to talk about, which is Pharaoh: A New Era, which Top Gunner, yes, I have played. So Pharaoh is an older game. They just revamped it literally a couple months ago. I
Ooh,
started
very nice.
playing it. I played it, and I knew I was gonna hate it. I knew I was gonna hate it. But I played it, and then because after I played it for the first time, I started getting all these followers, and so many people started showing up and saying, "Oh my god, I played this when I was a kid!" Like, I mean, some people were getting some great nostalgia. I was suffering. I was suffering so deeply. This game. And so we were playing it relatively consistently,
gosh.
and then I got whomped like a couple weeks ago. Absolutely. And the whole thing is that
Stomped on him.
it's a city builder game.
Yeah.
With the new era, it actually combines the original game and then an original DLC, which was called Cleopatra. And so it
Makes sense.
literally goes through ancient Egyptian history, and you are creating these cities. It is so accurate in some ways. They talk about, like, these are actual cities, and there are certain cities that you can either choose at certain levels. You can either choose if you want to do a more military based one or a non-military based one. And so the military based ones, like, they are cities that are fortresses, and they're using ancient Egyptian names for a lot of them. And they essentially, like, at the beginning of every level, there will be this giant paragraph, and this narrator will, like, list off what your tasks are. And, like, they're like, you're gonna have to support this city because you have like all the wood, or you have all the papyrus, and blah 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 blah. Yes, Nat.
Right.
The only thing that is inaccurate is that there are firefighters in this game, and it annoys me. It annoys me so much, but it is like, yes, the one
Oh my
like
God.
big, the one
I didn't know
massive
Ben Franklin was in.
the massive
Ben
inaccuracy
Franklin was
is
in
that
Egypt.
essentially the three main things you have to put in each of your little cities is a police station, a firefighter, and an architect to make sure you don't get burgled, your houses don't catch on fire, and that your house don't collapse. And so the firefighter
right.
one, there must have been some, like, we know the ancient Egyptians, there must have been some
System in place.
system established. There was no firefighter.
I'm sure it was a communal system, not too dissimilar to many other cultures.
Yeah, like, they had to have something. We know that. But yeah, the firefighters are the only, like, pretty inaccurate part of this game. But the thing that I find so accurate that it makes me mad is that depending on what city you're in, you will have different resources. So you can be in a city that you don't get any or you only have farming. You can't hunt, you can't fish, you can only
Can't get
farm.
wood or gold
And guess what? You can only farm, like, the harvest season only comes when the river floods, and if the gods are pissed at you, they won't flood the river, and then you won't get any food.
Yeah.
And so you suffer, and then the thing is, you need certain things to make your people happy, and if you cannot produce them yourself, you have to trade for them. But if you don't have enough money to buy the trade route and to buy the items, then you're screwed. And then there are some levels that you have a freaking gold mine, and literally within 20 minutes of me playing this level, I am fully rich. I can buy anything I want.
Yeah.
But the problem is that to win, you can do you can do freestyle in this game, but I really wanted to kind of go through ancient Egyptian history, because one of the cool parts they did is that depending on what time period you would build different types of monuments. So, like, you started off with a step pyramid, you started off with a mastaba, and then eventually you get to real pyramids, and in the Middle Kingdom you get more pyramids. I think the place we ended is, like, right at the end of the Middle Kingdom, because I don't know if we got to the New Kingdom. But it just, the level I had, one of the people who I had met after playing this game told me that level took him like 10 hours. And I was like,
Oof.
what am I gonna do? I'm not spending a 10-hour stream playing this game that makes me mad.
I know, right?
So we have not encountered it. I really wanted to beat at least, like they give you 2 options sometimes at certain levels. I just wanted to beat every single one to get to Cleopatra. Who knows? Maybe one day I will brave it again.
Yeah, that reminds me of that. There's another real-time strategy Viking one. It's called Northgard, which I can't poke at it because of the green screen, but I have a board game version of it sitting on my thing there. But it is a video game, and it's a hex crawler. So you start off with a base, and then you have to go like discover the hex tiles next to you, and they have different resources.
That's like pre-dynastic Egypt. That's how that works. Is you have to send discovery
and then you settle
points
on that one, and you get the resources from there, and you can do that. That's another game where if you get bad RNG, like if you get bad rolls on what those hex tiles are going to be, you are done, and there's not much you could do about it. Especially if you pick a class that's very. Like if you pick one of the clans, one of the Viking clans who's super into hunting, you're gonna, and then you end up in a place that's like all farmland and all woodsland and all not hunting, then you're just like, well, what am I gonna do?
Yeah,
you just end up having to push. It's crazy.
The game was so hard because it really was. It just depended on the level. Like there was no way, like, and granted, I was very grateful that I had a lot of people who had played it a lot and then come into the game and told me like, oh, you know, the best way is you make neighborhoods. You put everything in a circle and you put the houses on the outside and the things that they need on the inside. I was like, this is the best, because otherwise would not have worked. But then I wouldn't plan ahead, and then I'd have to fit things, and then people would be pissed that there's no bazaar, and I'm like, but I found it.
We can't always get what we want. Pixels.
There's literally a clip of me saying, my people don't have to be happy. There's something that I was so pissed at them, and I was like, because the way that you would have to complete each level is you would have to get certain levels of like happiness, which it wasn't called happiness, it was like prestige. You had to be recognized within like the outer pharaoh. Like if he would essentially, they would come in and say, hey, we need 12,000 of your wheat, and now you're like, well, I have to give it to you or else you're gonna make me mad. And and then you had to build.
If it makes you feel better, I'm pretty sure there's a clip of me playing Crusader Kings 3 saying something along the lines of like, what do you mean I can't assassinate my own son? This is garbage.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then
because he tried to kill me on a boating trip and I couldn't kill him back. And I'm like,
absolutely, he deserves it. Like, come on. No. And then the gods were never happy, and that was something that, like, I didn't encounter in a lot of ancient Egyptian games. It's like, you know about the gods, but like, I hate to say it, they don't really exist, kind of like
right.
In Origins, abstract. They exist, and like, you know that they're there, but they don't really affect the world very much. And in Pharaoh, they affect the world so much, which it actually is pretty accurate, is that each city has its own set of like gods that they specifically worship, and there's always one main god. I'm like, hey, that's almost exactly what a lot of the huge cities in Egypt were like. But you would have a plaza, and as long as you had like enough ratio of temples and shrines to each of the gods so that people were happy, they would be happy. But if you didn't, then you could like have a festival for them in the plaza.
Yeah.
But then I would forget, because there were so many things to do, and you couldn't schedule them ahead.
Get so caught up.
And so essentially what would happen is something would pop up and it says, Horus is pissed at you. It's not going to flood, or I destroyed your storage place. And I'm like, no, you burned all of my limestone. Like, you
need a second player just to help manage
it literally, I'm not even joking.
To have 2 people run the country.
Nana Banana, who my mod in the chat, she was the person that I was like, just remind me I have to please the gods. And she would just come in and say, don't forget to please the gods. I was like, thank you. Like, go back in.
Perfect.
And like rework it, because like it was killing me. It was killing me very slowly that like the gods were pissed at me. And like, that's not accurate, but it's not inaccurate in a weird way. Like,
like, the way that they thought of it.
That was the thought. That was the thought that they thought was gonna happen. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, for this dude, I am not sure if Amarna was a site that you could have done in the game. I never got there. I wanted to. I feel like there might have been a level that was Amarna, and I really hope there is, because that would be cool. I might have to look at that, because I'm wondering if I might just skip this level, but I know it's gonna get. It also just gets progressively harder. It just, in general, it's just like the expectations of you The other thing is that military forts cost like 1,000 Deben, and if you didn't have 1,000 Deben, then army would come in and raid you, and then
yeah, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
Get
That's how
Debens
one of the levels ended. Is that they literally just they literally like they were like, an army's coming in 2 months, and I'm like, I don't have $1,000 to buy a fort, and then as it is, you need months to recruit people for the fort, and I'm like, I don't have that.
Everybody.
Yeah, and so
that's when you sell everything unnecessary and you just throw a party for 2 months.
Yeah.
It's like, you people are going out, you're going out loving it.
They just came in and said, "Oop, this is mine." I'm like, okay.
Party in the bazaar every day, all day, every day. Yeah. Let's go.
It was quite ridiculous.
2-month festival.
And those are just games that I don't know. I just can't take it. I don't like. I also get very focused, and so I just don't talk on stream like at all. Like, I'll just stare at the screen for so long.
I've done that.
And then
I've done that. That happens to me. That happens to me if I stream too late, and it's like, and I'm really tired.
Well,
like I've been working, and I'm just kind of sitting there like.
I think it was the second. And
I catch myself in the camera like. Oh wait a minute.
Yeah. No, we're gonna talk about that game. But no,
like
there was
five head on screen, and
there
that's
was
it.
the second time and the third time I played Pharaoh, I was up. I usually start streaming at like 8 or so. I was up till 3 in the morning because I kept thinking I was so close to finishing the level, and I was going full crazy, like absolutely full crazy, and it just was. I was like, we're never doing this again. We will stop in the middle of the
You're not alone. I've done many a 3 a.m. stream night. Although usually that's...
I hadn't done that in years. I literally had not done that since like because the first year of streaming I didn't work. I wasn't working. So like my God, we were going late all the time. It was great. But I was literally working.
See, that's like the opposite. I was very regimented with my first year streaming. Yeah, because my son was relatively new at that time. He was he was in his first year or two, and so I had a very strict streaming schedule. Like, I ended at 11 o'clock, so that I could go to bed with enough time to be functional the next day. Yeah, and then over time I learned, I don't need that much sleep to be functional, and so I just progressively started streaming later and later. Yeah, and now I'm like, 5 hours? That's a great night.
I know, and now I can. Hi, Zegmas. Now I can kind of go, but late. But the weird thing is that my schedule is never the same every single week, and so I work weekends now. Yeah. So like, my off days are Mondays and Tuesdays. But even though it's Tuesday, I still have to go into work on Wednesday. So it's like. Yeah. So now I'm at least trying to get at least 3 hours every time. But oh my God, I miss when I could stream from like 8 to like 1 in the morning. Just playing, because you could get so much done in 2 hours. You could never get anything done in the big Assassin's Creed game.
Yeah, especially in those games. Yeah, that was probably part of the reason why I dropped Crusader Kings, because I used to do a Sunday brunch stream where I would come on around I would have midday, and it started off, and what I would do is I would go and I would make myself like something for brunch. I'd be like, today we're going to have like this breakfast sandwich. Yay. and then I would play Crusader Kings and sit there and just talk about I would usually also try to tie in like an archaeology lecture series, so I would do like a chat about something archaeology related and then jump to Crusader Kings. But that became more and more difficult as my son got older, and he had more demands during the day, so I had to drop the brunch stream.
I used to have a 3 o'clock Sunday stream, and that I always tried to make like one of the weekend streams the more educational of the rest of them.
I did the same thing. Yeah. I wonder why that's the draw.
I don't know. I think the thought that people are more free on the weekends so that you can
maybe.
Because honestly, like, I would love to be able to actually stream during the day, because it just seems like people who can stream during the day, just like as soon as you make that change, things pop off. Like,
well, a lot of people would put it on at work. Yeah. I feel like.
Well, that's the thing is, Real Men Grow Beards is in England, and he works nights, and so he is here every single night almost, but it's because he is working in the middle of the night in England. But everyone else is like, they'll leave like halfway through, and so it's kind of just fun like that. And
that's true. Top Gunner, you're right. We did have peak Cahokia brunch. So there was this running joke in my chat about Cahokia, because I worked there for a summer. My wife grew up near there, so we went there and worked for a little while. For those who don't know, it's the largest pre-contact site in North America. It's an incredibly important, large Indigenous American site, and I did a stream with my wife in like my first year of streaming, I think, where I made a tier list for archaeological sites.
Ooh.
Of like, I'm going to make a tier list of where
Yeah.
I think certain archaeological sites fall. And I put Cahokia at the very top of A tier,
Yeah.
but I had an S tier above it.
Okay.
And the fact that Cahokia didn't make it onto S tier was a grave offense to a large number of people in my chat.
Oh no. Oh my god.
It then became a running joke for a very long time.
Yeah.
Between figuring out where Cahokia fell on the A to S tier chart.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
And we did a charity stream recently, and one of the donation goals was I permanently have to claim that Cahokia is an S tier site.
Ah, gotcha.
And they donated enough money.
Love it.
They donated a lot of money. I'll be honest, I put that high up on the goals list. And,
you know.
And they were like, they saw that on the early part of the night. We're like, all right, listen up, everybody. We got a job to do here.
I might have to. I think I'm gonna have to steal this idea from you after I come back from Egypt, because like I'm planning my first trip to Egypt in February, and so I don't feel like I could accurately be able to like rank sites before I go to them. But I think I'm gonna
do
have
it before and after, or like film a before,
oh yeah,
and then
actually,
go,
that's a
and
good
then film
idea.
a follow up as an after.
Because that's the other thing is that like I'm planning this
Then
whole
you
trip.
get 2 videos.
Yeah, exactly.
2 videos that'll sit in your YouTube queue for a few years.
Yeah, absolutely they will. But one of the things that like I'm trying to go back and forth and decide is that like I think I want to spend more time in Luxor because I'm just more interested in New Kingdom stuff and pyramids and like or not the pyramids and tombs, because the tombs are a little harder to get to and there's a lot of them and like there's potentially like lots of things to do. And so it seems weird that I want to see those before I see the pyramids. But the way that I've scheduled out my very basic timeline is that I just pulled all of the things that are in the city and said, okay, like I think this is going to take this long. So now I'm technically scheduled that we're going to stay in Cairo more. And I'm thinking of backing out. I'm thinking of removing a day and adding it to Luxor just because I think it's...
Might as well. Well, look at it this way.
It's back and forth.
If you turn on your TV on cable and you flip through the channels, there's a high likelihood you're going to see the pyramids somewhere.
That's also true, yeah.
But there's a low chance that you're going to see the tombs of Luxor somewhere.
Very, very true. Absolutely. Yeah.
So
I think that's
where I think.
Yeah.
A lot of people, you see pyramids all the time.
Yeah. I think I'm
Just
definitely going to do this.
Videos, but they're everywhere.
I think this will be... Somebody go write this on my Discord so that I remember, because I'm going to forget. But I do think...
Hey, change your schedule.
Yeah, please put it... It's going to be like one of the... We'll do it as maybe one of the last streams before I go. Because I think that'd be great, because I think there's so many museums, there's so many archaeological sites, and like I know a lot about a lot of them, but like they're going to be different in person and stuff. So I'm definitely stealing this idea from you, because that sounds great.
Good. I think it's a good one.
I love that.
So do you want to hear about my favorite representation of Vikings in games?
Absolutely. And we're going up on your scale and I'm going down on my scale.
Yeah.
That's perfect. I don't mind.
So my favorite representation, and this is going to bring up a couple of tangents that I already have pre-planned.
Go for it.
Okay. So it's the game is Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, which is a game that I know I say Vikings, and this is where the conversation. This is why I air quoted it before. Hellblade doesn't really feature Vikings, right? It does in the sense that like the very earliest iteration of them. But I think that's something that happens with Viking games in general, is that a lot of people will call it a Viking game when they're really talking about like a Proto-Norse Iron Age Germanic game. And this is a real niche semantic that I think Ludo will appreciate as well. But like the fine line happening in, what was it, like June of 793 when June or July 793 when Lindisfarne was attacked. That one day, it's like, oh, all of a sudden now they're Vikings, and it's like there's more to it. It involves a lot with like they're traveling into Britain and like they're the exportation of Scandinavian conquest. But Hellblade, I think, does something that not a lot of games do, which portray the Vikings as villains. Because the main character, Senua, is a Pictish woman, that is to say a Northern Scottish woman, from like late Iron Age, early medieval Scottish
I've
woman.
actually, I think I've heard of that. That sounds familiar.
Yeah. So the game is really compelling. It's actually talked more so about its representation of mental health, because the whole thing that happens is that her character is a survivor of a raid on her Pictish village site, and she is the only survivor. And everyone else is killed, and they're strung up, and like, all this stuff happens. Her husband is killed, and that sort of trauma, and how the trauma impacts her is a big part of the game. They're like, oh, wear headphones, because when you're wearing headphones, they have auditory cues that are like whispers, where like an enemy is behind you and it's about to swing, and from the point where the enemy is in your headphones, you'll hear like, watch out, and you're like, as you like turn around, and there's a guy there like ready to murder you. It's so fun. It's so creepy. It's just, it's really cool. Creepy. But what they in this game, the Vikings are portrayed as these animalistic savages. Like, they all wear like animal heads and furs. Like, there's deer heads, there's raven cloaked and like beaked things. They're all these sort of like nightmarish versions, because it's her psyche that she's, and she's fighting her way to hell. Hel.
Okay.
And the goddess. So it's very much like a kind of, it's a fantasy, but it is so it doesn't have a lot of like historical truth to it.
Yeah.
But I think what's so compelling about it and so important is that it highlights European views, like other European views of medieval Scandinavians, in a way that isn't shown in a lot of games. We see the description of them by the monks in Lindisfarne and by the Christian church, and how they portray them as like, these monsters riding dragon ships or something. This is just a normal person from an also kind of more pagan culture, who is dealing with just like an objective look at these folks and how they're interacting with their culture and how they're interacting with them. And it's terrifying, and it's hard, and it's challenging and violent, and it kind of highlights what I was talking about before, where Vikings spent like a portion of the year just going out and being horrible humans from like a modern ethical scale. Like they went and they just did horrible tragedies. And this is a victim of that, who has to kind of come to terms with these changes, is like mentally grasping all of the pain. And it kind of showcases the horrors that were happening at this time period at the hands of Vikings and other cultures, which I think is really important for people to see.
Yeah.
Especially in a world and a current culture, which is really kind of pedestaling Vikings. And like if you're playing as Vikings in a game, they're like these big hero guys, and even if they're the opposing guys, they're like these like comically kind of like, they're just big buff jacked like meathead guys that are Vikings. But it's like no, like you need to highlight the crap that they did, because it wasn't pretty.
I was gonna say,
and I think Hellblade really does that, on top of just being an amazing story based game.
I would really like to see the ancient Egyptians as a villain in general.
That'd be interesting,
because I don't really think I'm really trying to think of any pop culture thing that I can think of where they are.
Prince of Egypt.
Why didn't I think of that? I literally watched it yesterday.
Prince of Egypt game. Let's go.
And the musical and opera Aida.
The musical Aida.
And the Old Testament. I'm dumb. Don't stop making fun of me. Yes. Things like that. I was thinking more video games and movies. Yes. Prince of Egypt. Yeah, you're right.
Vikings are indeed just.
But also, I feel like because it's the Bible, I think it's different. Like I'm wondering if there's anything outside biblical stories and stuff where and more recent, because I don't think in the world of Egyptomania, Egyptians are really ever seen as the villain, unless you're talking about Bible stories, because truly, like,
right,
I can't think of literally anything. The only exception is I keep thinking of about the TV show Rome, where like they are the Romans, so they are looking at Egypt as like kind of outsider, but also one of the guys sleeps with Cleopatra and literally like is technically the father of Caesarion, when we're gonna like ignore that completely.
Right.
But like they didn't fully villainize them, but at least they were the outsider versus the main characters of it. But I think that would be really interesting. I haven't really seen, because for the most part, like, and that's a very thing that I think this is a necessary story to tell, because I think you're right. People put the Egyptians on a pedestal when they were literally so racist. And They were so, I hate using the word racism, but they were so prejudiced against anyone who wasn't Egyptian. And granted,
Yeah.
most ancient cultures were kind of like that, like to
They were.
find,
It was a very different thing. Like the idea, like racial identity back then was so strong.
Yeah.
Like people were different people
Yeah.
from different
and
realms.
I think it's because they literally lived so far away from each other for the most part. Like sometimes they were relatively close, but like in the very, very ancient world, like you would have a couple people go out and trade, but you really wouldn't see any. Like no lay person, like no lower class people are going to see people from anywhere else. It's really only going to be those people who are traveling and going out and stuff.
Exactly.
And like the Egyptians, they just thought they were the shit. They thought they were the best.
Yeah.
And they just,
it's also really driving modern views of African archaeology in general, because I was talking with someone about that today when I was practicing for this lecture, and and like I brought up like where I said, like, you know, thinking about the archaeology of Africa, I worked with someone recently who does Ethiopian archaeology.
Yeah.
And they were telling me a lot of things, and they were showing me a lot of stuff, which is really cool, and that you don't really hear about.
No.
Like for a lot of people, it's like, oh, there's the human origins, and then the Egyptians, and you're like, wait, you missed 3 million years.
Yeah.
Like, what in between that? And then after that, it's like Egypt happens, and then you hear a little bit about Carthage, a little bit about Mansa Musa, and then it's just kind of like, and then
and
you're done. But you're like, wait a minute, there's
like,
literal castles in Africa.
Well,
there's
that's
castles
kind of
sitting
thing.
on plateaus that people don't know about.
So with my job, I work as a museum educator in an archaeology museum, but also other museums within like our whole city. And we went and did an outreach at an elementary school, and I noticed in the classroom we were set up with, there was a world history book, and I was like, oh, I'm picking this up. And I was like, we had time, I was reading it, I was seeing what they learned, because I know that third grade in Virginia standards, they learn about ancient cultures for like the first time.
Cool.
And the main ones they learn about are Greece, Rome, China, and Mali. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't learn this.
Mali.
Like, Mali. I know. I was like so happy and like so impressed, but I was just literally like,
that's good.
I never learned about ancient Mali. Like I also never in my entire archaeology career, art history career, the only little things that I would learn about other African cultures was in grad school. My university's museum had an Egyptian section and a permanent African collection. And so I only learned the very basics of the art history to give tours. But I never really got a full good foundation of any of those things. So I always hated giving the tours of it because I felt like I couldn't answer questions like fully and stuff. And so like I was very impressed that like it's in now our Virginia state standards that you have to, that Mali is included in that. And also I didn't even learn about ancient China. That was the other thing. It was like, I didn't learn about that one either. It was really probably Greece and Rome and Egypt. And maybe Mesopotamia as well, like which usually gets included. But you're right. Egypt is put on a pedestal. And it is why there's a lot of race culture and people believing that they are descendants of ancient Egyptians because they are African. Because if we don't know where we're coming from, then why don't we just say we come from a really advanced civilization? And that was that was an entire movement in American race theory, in which why a lot of African Americans identify that Egypt is an African country, and all of this thing that just gets muddled up in this whole.
I'll have you know, I took a 23andMe test, and I am in fact 0.2% Coptic Egyptian.
Oh, I'm very jealous. The first time. The first time I took my ancestry test, I was like 0.2% sub-Saharan African, and then they updated it and it went away, and I was like, damn it.
Oh, well, that's tragic. My Coptic came out of nowhere. It wasn't there the first time, and then I checked it recently. I was like, what?
That's
what?
Really cool. I was really hoping that I was gonna get some like Mongolian steppe Asian, because my dad's family comes from Hungary, and I know that area did get reached by like the Mongols, and I was like, wouldn't that be really random that if I got like a 0.2,
wouldn't that just be something?
Wouldn't that just be something very interesting? But yeah, it's like it becomes so wishy-washy, and the ancient Egyptians were not the best people, like in like people don't really talk about like slavery.
This is a big discussion within Viking elements as well, especially nowadays. The question of ethnicity within the Viking Age and Scandinavian cultures and everything.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's there's a lot more studies coming out about like genealogies and everything that are kind of tying different peoples back. But I mean, the Vikings were big slavers, so it's not surprising at all that they had people kind of getting from everywhere. So.
That's the weird thing, is that like Egyptians were not, in comparison to other ancient cultures, were not huge with it, but they did. But often they only get roped around with biblical archaeology, and then I have to break it to people that I'm so sorry, but there is no archaeological evidence that there was a large Jewish population living in Egypt, let alone enslaved in Egypt.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
we got nothing. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, and so it's like, but we don't talk, like, whenever you talk about that, it always goes to the Bible. Like, they don't talk about the actual possibilities of those things.
Yeah.
And that, like, there's the possibility that ancient Egyptian pharaohs would take children from tribe leaders or different leaders and teach and make them stay in the palace and then teach them along with their children, and like we don't talk about that as much, and it would be really. That's a very good question, Top Gunner. Where anyone in ancient is really good.
To Top Gunner, I would say it's subjective.
It's subjective. Hysterically,
by today's standards, probably no, but by their standards, probably yeah.
So I took a myth and literature class in college, and I thought we were going to be talking about Greek myths, Norse myths, like Mesoamerican myths,
the OGs.
Myths. I thought that's what we were going to talk about. This woman, this Jewish studies professor, gets up and starts deconstructing the Old Testament, and I was like,
amazing.
Whoa!
Holy crap.
And I was like, completely Catholic child, moving away from it, going into college, like sophomore year or something. And one of the things that she points out...
She woke up and chose violence.
Yeah. She was... I couldn't even believe it. I was shocked. But she points out all of these...
Yeah, for real, Aro.
She points out all of these, like, literature points. Like, if you just look at the Bible as, like, as a persuasive essay, it, like... She, like, blows these whole things out of proportion. And one of the things that she pointed out was that, technically, in the flood myth, Noah is not said to be a good person. He is just said to be better than the rest of them. And I was shook. I was so shook. I was like, wait, what are you talking about? And it's just like, Noah was just better than some of them.
Mount Sinai, God's just looking down like, damn.
Just,
like, all right, I guess. Come on up.
It always just cracks me. I remember, like,
that's
completely...
brutal.
I couldn't even believe it. I was like absolutely shooketh, and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Opening my eyes to all these different things, but that made me think of like, probably there's probably only a couple like super good people that we have and stuff. But oh my god. But yeah, there's a lot of things that are just so nuanced that don't get talked about. And I just love how you brought up that the villain thing, because that's that's actually one of my pet peeves, not specifically because the ancient Egyptians are villains, because they're not. But the next couple games I want to talk about follow very similar tropes, and one of them
they should do a Nubian game with Egyptian villains.
Yeah, one of them.
No, smile. Yeah, that has to happen. You're just like, okay, wait, no, seriously.
Seriously, absolutely. One of the things is that a lot of games decide to villainize the same people and the same gods when they are not evil gods.
Right.
And we talked about this a little bit at my last guest lecture, because I had a Kemetic priestess come on and talk about the modern practice.
You guys stopped by after that. I remember that.
Yeah, she was great. And the thing is, she is a priestess of Set, who is the god of chaos.
The bad god.
The bad guy. So all of these games involve pretty much villainizing Set. The first one, and I will say, these all date from the early 2000s, and so it is... It all makes a little bit more sense, because it was some sort of...
In that context.
There was some sort of height of, like, ancient Egypt-themed games around that time that were being made for lots of different gaming systems and stuff. And so it makes sense that they kind of all fall around the same time. The first one I want to talk about is one of my favorite games we've ever played. That's kind of the fun part about this, is like there are serious problems with these, but they're my favorite games because they're so much fun.
Yeah.
So this one is called Sphinx and the Cursed Mummy.
Okay.
It comes from 2003. You mainly play as a character named Sphinx, who is like a demigod, sort of. He looks like a dude, but has a tail. And doesn't have, well, Egyptian sphinxes wouldn't have wings, but he doesn't have the body of this. It should be a head of a person and the body of a lion. He has the body of a human just with a tail. But
interesting.
Essentially, the main plot of this game is that Sphinx and another person named Horus, who is represented accurately as a human with a falcon head, are apprentices of a priest named Imhotep. That is another trend, is that Imhotep, that name, gets thrown
it's
everywhere.
Not a real name. And it's not an actual person.
No, it is.
Right? They never actually found... They did find an Imhotep? Okay.
So there are multiple Imhoteps. This is the whole thing. And I've talked about this on stream with the Mummy movie, the original Mummy movie. Imhotep is a real person. He was the architect of the Pyramid of Djoser, which is the first large pyramid that survives. It's a step pyramid, but he was this architect. He was great. He was very impressive, and so much so that in the late period, literally thousands of years later, people start worshiping him as a god because of his architecture skills and stuff. The problem with the Mummy movie is that the one guy is named Imhotep, the mummy, which granted, I don't blame this on the 1999 Mummy movie. It's from the 1932 Mummy movie. They just copied it. So, like,
of course. Yeah,
I don't expect
we
the 1932.
We can never speak any slander of the 1999 Mummy movie. There's nothing.
Yeah, we need to do a whole nother one about Vikings and Egypt in movies and stuff, and then I will get deep dive into it. It's not part of my personal Egyptology career. I'm an Indiana Jones person, and I didn't watch it until I was already an Egyptologist, so I don't have the nostalgia to carry me through the inaccuracies.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Ludo. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't have the nostalgia to carry me through the inaccuracies like I do with Indiana Jones. And that's kind of that you need that sometimes. Like that happens.
Don't kill our fantasy. Don't do it.
I'm sorry. It's not the worst. It's just not one of my nearly favorite games.
I know. Yeah.
So you play as this guy named Sphinx, and so he's the apprentice of a priest. I'm like, okay, Imhotep's sort of near a priest, so that's fine. But then they are both sent to the hostile place of Uruk, which I did not know what that was, because one, it's not ancient Egyptian. It is a real place in Mesopotamia.
Yeah. It's where Saruman made all the.
It's like, I'm like, what the heck? It's not even.
Why are we going all the way there?
It's like, yeah, it's supposedly then like Horus dies and Sphinx retrieve this blade of Osiris and stuff. But yeah, so Uruk is a Mesopotamian city in Iraq. Has absolutely nothing to do with Egypt. Probably is not even nearly on the same timeline.
Not at all. I guess maybe Egypt would have been around at the same time. Uruk was old.
It is true. This is the thing, is we're very bad. Melissa is very bad at knowing time periods of anything outside of ancient
overlapping.
Egypt. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Overlapping time periods.
No overlapping timelines in my mind. So it could be, but who knows?
Does Gilgamesh make an appearance? Fair question.
No, but it is called Sphinx and the Cursed Mummy, and so the other person that you play as is a mummy. But you start out as a human. You start out as Tutankhamun, a child, which he was.
Let's go.
So that's fine.
A child?
A child. No. Yeah. So you play as Tutankhamun, and you're like the little bumbling kind of prince. You're like the skinny little dude, which honestly was very on par for me. But the problem is that he discovers that there's a conspiracy being hatched by his brother, who is Akhenaten. Which is completely wrong. But guess what? It's not actually Akhenaten. It's actually Set disguised as Akhenaten. But it is his brother. Akhenaten and Tutankhamun are brothers, and I'm not even joking you. They are like full-grown adult and child brothers. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
I mean, I can't really complain. One of the most popular forms of Viking media is that Vikings TV show where they made Ragnar Lothbrok and freaking Rollo brothers, and they're assuming Ragnar existed.
Yeah.
A solid 100 to 200 years apart in age.
Oh, sorry. That was the last thing I was gonna say about the Mummy movie. Is that Imhotep falls in love with Ankh-Sen-Amun. Ankh-Sen-Amun
Yes.
is Tutankhamun's wife. There's a good 1,500 years between those two names, and so
Okay.
I like to think it is literally like Stacy
Two different people.
getting with I can't think
Carl.
of it. Reginald, like two names that just don't literally mix because they're thousands of years apart and stuff. So that was my.
Oh, that's a funny way to think of it. Yeah.
But I don't blame that on the 1999 movie, except they may have been able to change it. But whatever.
Right.
But yeah, so Akhenaten and Tutankhamun are brothers. He kills Tutankhamun for a ritual, but then he comes alive as a mummy. And essentially, you have to collect all of the canopic jars, and you're playing like two kind of different thing. Yeah, it's more like Tiffany and like Nebuchadnezzar or something.
Nebuchadnezzar. Let's
I'm not
go.
even joking. I tried to make a really good comparison to this by looking up the most popular names like 1,000 years ago, and it just wasn't working. Like there was just
Yeah.
yeah, actually,
Yeah.
genuinely, that's how the names kind of work out. But so the whole thing is that it's centered around ancient Egyptian mythology, which is why I can kind of give it a little bit more leeway than ancient Egyptian history. It does include Tutankhamun, and that's like the worst part and stuff because it's just
Right.
Although there is technically a theory, technically they did DNA tests on the body that they think is Akhenaten and the one they know is Tutankhamun, and technically they know they are male relatives, but
Yeah, from somewhere. Maybe not brothers, but somewhere along the line.
But yeah, it's still the most likely candidate is father and son, so it's just really, really annoying. But the thing is that they keep using the common tropes that Set is like this ultimate villain, and that's not really the truth. Like, yes, he is the god of chaos, but the ancient Egyptians really understood that chaos and order were both necessary. Like, you really couldn't have one or the other. You had to have both.
Scale.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of that balance is a huge part of ancient Egyptian understanding of just life. And like, Set is like one of the main... Yes, Set is very much Loki. Yeah, I think that is I think in granted, I don't know actual... We'll say this. I don't know actual Norse history. I'm stupidly going off of Marvel history because I don't know any.
That's fine. I
Norse
don't
mythology.
know. I don't know a lot of actual Egyptian history, so I'm gonna agree with you and say, yeah, they're the same.
But it's that kind of balance that like the ultimate hero, and that's the other thing is that I think it's also very similar to the simple parts of Norse mythology is that like Loki, at least in the Marvel universe, Loki and Thor are brothers, and Set and Osiris are brothers, and they are the people who are balancing it. And so there are actual pharaohs who have worshipped Set, and Set became their main god. Seti the first, his name is literally means Set. And there were certain other pharaohs that would revere him, and he didn't have a lot of temples. Like, it was only really in certain periods that he would be heavily worshipped, but like he's not this villain. And I think
Loki wasn't treated with that either. Actually, fun fact, there's this type of artifact in Scandinavia that's a Loki mask, and blacksmiths used to keep it. And it was this face that was like this kind of like contorted Loki face with his tongue out. And basically what they would do is they would have it in their blacksmith shop. And the idea that that I read about it was that it's meant to be based off of one of the myths about Loki where long story short, he makes a bet with some dwarves and basically convinces them, like, you need to make these really high quality items for the gods. And if you make them really well, then the gods are going to do a good thing for you. And if you don't make them as well, then the gods are going to do a really good thing for me, Loki. And so the dwarves are working on all this stuff. And one of the things that Loki does to try and rig the race is he turns into like a fly, and he starts biting at them really viciously. So they have these mask things that some blacksmiths used, which were meant to kind of like scare off flies to let them concentrate on their work. You never heard about the masks? Yeah, I just heard about them recently, like within like a past like couple of years.
Wow.
And
really
there's
cool.
not a lot of examples of them.
Yeah.
I think I've only seen one example, but that was the theory that they put around that, was that it was meant to be a Loki representation.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, Set
the snapped in Hearthstone. Let me see if that's what I'm thinking of.
The thing with the reason why like Set is so villainized, it is really has to do with the ancient Egyptian mythology that he kills his brother. Like, it's the whole big thing, like that he kills Osiris, he chops him up to become not exactly king of the gods, just to become the most powerful of them, and that Osiris' son Horus has to take him down eventually. And it's just that this story is only meant to essentially talk about the order versus chaos, which is just this innate thing that all ancient Egyptians kind of understood, that like that the pharaoh was order, the pharaoh had control over order, and the chaos is everywhere. The chaos is the outside world, the chaos is the animal world, and that's what the story tells us. It doesn't really tell us exactly, because the other thing is that like you still see Set being depicted. You don't really, he's dead, but he's not really dead. Like, you still hear him in other myths, and so it's not like, oh yeah, it's very similar to the Cain and Abel story, and I'm sure I haven't read any actual like scholarly talks about those being connected,
right?
But considering that the Bible takes the flood myth from Mesopotamia, I don't doubt that at all, that it could be just taken from Egypt. Like, that's...
Yeah, I mean, it's very likely that myths were borrowed from different things around those places. And also, Ludo, I did just look it up. I may be thinking of the snapped in stone. When I said mask, and I probably should have clarified this, because I realized that that's like an archaeological... like, sometimes you'll refer to a facial thing as like a mask, even though it's not a physical mask that you hold up to your face. I meant like a facade, I guess would be a better, or like a facial inscription. I sometimes had some professors use the term mask to describe that, but I think that that's kind of the gist of what it is. It was like this blacksmithing stone that functionally was helping to help the blacksmith, like help the forge and everything work a little better, but it had that Loki design on it, which was meant to kind of like have this spiritual tie-in as well.
It's very similar to the ancient Egyptian mummification priests would wear a mask, like an actual physical mask of Anubis's head, to pretend to be Anubis. And so frequently there are images of Anubis like with his hands like over a mummy, but only sometimes can you actually tell that it is actually supposed to be a mask. Like, you can sometimes see, because it looks like a tube. Like, it's like a giant tube that sits over here. But if he has like the actual like Nemes headdress that kind of goes down like this, like that's probably really Anubis. But if it has the tube, you're like, that's not Anubis, that's actually a priest. And like, a lot of people don't know that. It's one of my favorite like fun facts, that you just have to look really close in the iconography, like, and say, oh.
Yeah, you have to like subtly.
Because I think we only have like one preserved version of that mask that I've seen. Not a lot. But yeah, it's so the whole thing with Set being so villainized, I understand it, but like there are not very many, but there are a couple gods that are better choices to be like the huge villain. Apophis or Apep is like one of the big ones. He's like this massive snake creature that is kind of in the afterlife and kind of in this like ethereal like plane that Horus has to defeat every day so that the sun can go across the sky. And then there's tons of monsters and demons that are in the afterlife, which are not very well-rounded creatures. Like, we don't know a lot about them, but like you could easily take one of those and kind of make it your own. Not talking about other pop culture, but I just finally watched Moon Knight for the first time, and I
liked it.
I did like it, but it really...
It took me a while.
We watched it in one afternoon. I literally had my friend come over. We watched all 6 episodes in one afternoon. And the big thing about that is, like, they're taking 2 gods who, like, are totally chill and making them villains, and now I don't know which side is better.
Yeah, you're like, how do I know?
Like, it's like Khonsu is like not a violent person, and Ammit is a creature that nobody worshipped. Nobody, like, she doesn't leave the afterlife. She does literally nothing. So I guess I just corrected myself and said that you should do that. But the joke my friend made was very funny, was that it's like, of course the one white guy is going to make a cult about a god that wasn't even worshipped by the ancient Egyptians. And I was like, yeah, that actually tracks.
Yep.
Like, makes a lot of sense to me. But I guess that's still slightly better, but it also doesn't still go towards her character. So it's like, it's the double-edged sword. It's just like, okay, like, I don't know which one is better to pick because of that and stuff.
Yeah.
I have another similar one.
Can I pivot with like a completely random question?
Yeah,
or did
go
you have
for it.
something you were about to go through?
Absolutely.
How are game interpretations of hieroglyphs?
Such a good question. Such a good question. I briefly was going to talk about this about something else, but this is perfect. So,
Good.
I do not expect you to hire an Egyptologist, because I know that a very small part of the population would be able to read it if you did translate it, if you did actually write something to translate it.
Sure.
The only example of someone I know actually doing that is my literal college professor, my grad school professor. The Memphis Zoo redesigned their entrance into literally looking like a pylon from an ancient Egyptian temple, and they got her to write out their mission for the zoo in hieroglyphs on the actual thing.
Oh, cool.
So cool. Such a cool fun fact that they don't even talk about, that I only know because literally my professor
they
did
should.
it.
That's dope.
It's
That's
awesome.
super
It's
cool.
amazing. But again, it's like, I don't expect that. My one thing with it, and actually this happens with all Egyptomania, and I will give you a good example because I have so much crap here. For example, this is a completely random incense burner with the bust of Nefertiti on the back of it that I found.
Right.
These are mostly not accurate.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are just like partial, like it's not actual hieroglyphs, right? They're just like, they are, but they're just random symbols that make up a hieroglyph. You usually need to smush 2 or 3 together.
I don't care if you put them in the right order. Like, I really don't care. Granted, technically you could just go to look at any picture of a temple and just copy it in that order. I just don't like you making up hieroglyphs. There are so many. There are literally thousands, and there are free softwares that have all of them online. There's a Wikipedia that has all of the glyphs from James P. Allen's Middle Egyptian Dictionary. It's all in Wikipedia. It's all there.
Yeah.
I don't care if they're in any sort of order. Yeah, they're in Unicode. Exactly. Yeah, they're also in Unicode. Like, I don't care if they're all if they're next to each other and whatever. I just don't like when people make up a glyph, because it's so easy to do, because obviously people think they are emojis and they're not emojis. Like, people think that it depicts what it is. Yes, is the image of that glyph maybe going to be in the word for that specific thing? Yes, maybe. Not all the time. It's just, it's so complicated and stuff. And so I don't care. Like, even honestly, this is horrible, but actually this inside, like, this glyph is a very complicated, it's like 4 jars next to each other. I would never have expected them to use that. It's actually, this side portion is perfect. This is like, that, I don't know what that's supposed to be. This is technically right, this is technically right, this is technically right, that's not right, that's not right.
Yeah.
There is actually that one, it's upside down, but it's like
just convoluted.
So I don't necessarily care. And the things with, like, Assassin's Creed Origins, they're just constantly repeating the exact same image of hieroglyphs in every single temple and tomb.
Yeah, copy pasting.
It's like, they did have a little bit of variation. So, like, some temples would have images of gods, but you could tell that, like, the glyphs are the same everywhere. And so, like, that I'm okay with. One of the biggest pet peeves is in a game I'm going to talk about in a second, but instead of it's an ancient Egyptian themed game, and instead of putting ancient Egyptian on a sarcophagus, they put cuneiform.
Boy.
I literally was
so
mad. And luckily, one of the people I used to play the game with, because it's a multiplayer game, she's one of the mods in their Discord, and I think I might have told her enough that they did eventually change it. But yeah, it was a complete sarcophagus covered in cuneiform, and I'm gonna talk about that game in a second because I actually talk about that more in the archaeology side of it, but the Egyptology side of it is like they've gotten better because they've done a lot of updates.
Right.
Right. But in the very beginning,
I will say I did backhandedly ask this because
I actually wanted to know this too.
Runic use in games. Oh man. Well, I will say, and not just because Ludo knows the person who handled the runic use in Hellblade, but Hellblade probably does one of the more accurate representations of runic use, and the reason why is because Hellblade takes place at the very, very, very beginning of the Viking Age. It's like some of the earliest stuff that happens, and it uses Elder Futhark runes. So Norse runes, there are a number of different kinds of runes. However, the two that I'm going to talk about in the context of this are the Elder Futhark and the Younger Futhark. The Elder Futhark were pre-Viking runes. It was the ones that were used during the Iron Age and the pre-Viking Age time period. It was the older set of runes, hence the name. It had more characters, and the characters were a lot more flashy. They look nicer, they represent more sounds. Whereas the Younger Futhark was very trimmed down and a lot more simplistic. Medieval Icelandic runic manuscripts are bust. Let's go. But the Younger Futhark,
bad copper, sorry.
The Younger Futhark was a lot more streamlined, and it comboed a lot of sounds. So particularly like vowel sounds and sounds that were very similar because they were carving it, and so they wanted it to be a little bit easier. I have not personally. I'm sure they exist somewhere, and if someone wants to tell me one, I would love to play it. I have not yet found a game that is a Viking game that uses Younger Futhark runes.
Interesting.
They all use Elder Futhark.
Interesting.
Which, I mean, Elder Futhark probably went out of use in the early 800s.
That's
weird. Before Valhalla took place, they would have been done using Elder Futhark runes. And yet, so over more than half of the Viking Age did not have anyone using Elder Futhark. And probably like 90% of it was not really being used in prominence at all. The Younger Futhark was the more prominent one. And yet, Elder Futhark is the one that's more often used in games. And I understand why. I don't like it, but I've stopped whining about it. And the crux of it is, like, you're making a game. You need to have the runes look pretty. You can't have them be too confusing, which a lot of the Younger Futhark runes for the untrained eye look similar. When you're doing stuff like this, like, I understand why they want to have more characters represent more letters so that it's easier if people do, because a lot of times they are writing English with runes. And so they want people to, like, I think somebody in chat, I missed the name, but somebody did bring up that they played a game where you had to do that. Alex was saying this, there is a game where you have to translate an Elder Futhark thing, and it says, like, you just wasted your time with this. And like stuff like that happens where they will translate stuff. And I remember Hellblade does have a runestone, and you find runes and unlock it, and you unlock more of the runestone as you go, and it tells like a literal saga, a story, and I'm pretty sure it's in Norse, that they didn't translate it to English. They did like a straight up Norse one that you're able to, like, kind of parse and read in that sense. And that is extremely compelling and accurate in that regard.
Do you find, and this is something that is outside of video games, but like, do you find that when you search just like straight up Google like Norse or Viking alphabet, it would be that Elder one and not the Younger one? Like, and I will say, like, the alphabet in which it's like they tell you.
I mean, alphabet is a good way to describe it. That's another thing. Like, runes are an alphabet. That's at the crux. That's what they are. Because
the difficulty I have with hieroglyphs is that they don't translate that way. There are missing letters, and so you can search hieroglyph alphabet or Egyptian alphabet, and there are fill-in things that are not accurate. Granted, there's so many different dialects, and so they kind of sometimes there's no L. There's no.
You didn't spell words with you didn't spell out words letter by letter with hieroglyphs.
Yeah, it's not.
Words were. It was a pictorial system. So you have like like a river with a bird and a scroll to represent.
Actually, but yeah, it's.
Well, I don't know. I never took hieroglyphs.
It's that essentially when you look at the alphabet, those are the monoliterals. So those are glyphs that only say one sound, and there just happen to be only like not 25, maybe like I'm looking at my cheat sheet over there, like 20 or so maybe. But then there are biliterals, so there are glyphs that make a 2 sound, and then there's triliterals that make 3 sounds, and then there are determinatives that make no sound, that just help you establish. Those are the ones that are more pictorial because it'll help you. So you'll find a word that has henner or whatever, and this is not a real example, but it'll have 3 dots at the end, and that means that it's a seed or a small stone or a gemstone. But if you put a person at the end, it's actually a gem miner. Like, that's kind of how it sort of works. But there are also like
that's not exactly writable.
That's like it's not, and that's the problem with like hieroglyphs in the way that people write it, is that like you can just go anywhere and you can write your name in hieroglyphs. I'm like, no, because like my name's Melissa, there's no L in Middle Egyptian, and there's no there's no L and there's no E.
There's no L sound.
There's no L. Like how, like you can't say it like that, and so it's
you wouldn't do it like that.
It's overly simplified, and I find that it's like you look up, like you can just see the alphabet will always be there, but it's not like alphabet is not really the right word for it, because it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not all the
I
sounds.
mean, that's the thing. Like, I would love to see a game use the Younger Futhark, but I mean, I understand why they don't. It's just tough when you're looking at stuff that's supposed to be Viking media, and people are seeing non-Viking runes. They're seeing again, and again, this is super semantics.
Well, the thing is that probably not a lot of people know that runes are not. There are runes that are not Viking. Like, if you hear runes, probably people
exactly.
are just like Viking.
Or people understanding that the time period is not also Vikings. Like, Vikings were very specifically that pre-medieval time period from 793 to 1066, and anyone outside of that are like other Norse cultures who had other types of Norse runes. And so that's why I joke a lot of times. Like, I have a buddy here on Twitch who is he's building a video game. And so his streams are him coding and creating a video game. And one of the things that it's like a a fighting game. So he has a joking side project where they have a bear, and you can put a bunch of different hats on the bear and do puzzles. And so he started off, he was like, Chris, I made you a hat, and he put a horned Viking hat on the bear. And I was like, you know what I'm going to say here. I was like, that's not a Viking hat. It's a Proto-Norse hat, because it has the horns, which I mean is again like an oversimplification. Like it's certain Germanic time periods, certain Germanic cultures had horns on their helmets, and like early pre-Viking cultures had the horns on the helmets. So he went into the code and he changed the name from Viking helmet to Proto-Norse helmet.
Love that. Absolutely. What we need. We need that ally in the video game community.
Yeah, we need that. We need the stand there. So I understand why they're doing that. I also get really frustrated. Top Gunner mentioned this in chat before with the Vegvisir, which the Vegvisir is a symbol, which a lot of people say is a rune, but it's not a rune. It's like a symbol. It's this circle, looks almost like a clock. It's got like lines. It's like a compass. They call it the Viking compass. And it's got little branching arms with these designs and everything coming off of them. And the Vegvisir is very often called like a Viking symbol, and it's not. I'm pretty sure the earliest attestation that we have of it is like the 1800s. And it was a guy who was like creating a sort of occult book, and based on myth and lore and things around Viking Age Scandinavia. But Solomonic magic staves, full term there from Ludo. But it's so it's this weird symbol which a lot of people attribute with like travel and safety on water and all of this sort of stuff. So many Viking games use them as teleport portals, where like you come up and you use a Vegvisir to teleport. And I'm like, I get it. I get why they're doing it. I know it's not. If you go to any Viking merch store right now, they're going to have 17 Vegvisir stuff. Like I understand why it's there. But I always laugh and call it out. I have nothing against it. I have a Vegvisir like sticker on my computer. Like you can still joke about it. I just don't call it Viking. It's that's kind of what I get at. Like you could say it's a Norse inspired symbol, but it's not a Viking symbol.
With camels. Ancient Egypt didn't have camels.
Interesting.
No camels.
Interesting.
I don't know if there were camels around the Greco-Roman times, so that the camels that are in Assassin's Creed Origins, I don't know if those are accurate, but they did not have camels. And they didn't have horses until the New Kingdom, which most of the time people are relatively accurate on that one. But camels are a symbol of modern Egypt, not of ancient Egypt. And people associate camels a lot with ancient Egypt. I'm like, nope. No camels! No camels! I can't remember where camels. I did do a deep dive on this.
That's a life changer.
I did do a deep dive on this once because I found out that there is a naturally occurring group of camels in America, and I did a very deep dive as to where camels are coming from and how they ended up in America and the whole big thing. But I cannot remember at the moment when they got to Egypt. But it is they are
Yeah.
they might have been there around the Roman time, but I don't think they were. I think they were.
Right.
I think they were later. I think you're actually right, Haru Sakamon. I think there is a literal natural occurring native camel in America. I did some weird research on this. I can't remember what it is.
Oh, right. I feel like there was a native camel, but it didn't.
I
make
feel
it.
like it. Yeah, I can't remember. There's something about it.
It's probably in the same sense that like North America had a lion, but it's not really related
Not
to
really-
African
yeah,
lions. It's
exactly.
just kind of like a.
Something like that. So I saw it before. Where was it? I think it was Nat. Somebody brought up a very good point, which is the one that I wanted to get to the most because it is a converging of both of our specialties in a video game.
Okay.
It doesn't make any
Okay.
sense.
I'm here for it.
Okay, so this is also one of my favorite games we've ever played on stream. There are 3 games. They're called
Okay.
Ankh. So there's Ankh 1, Ankh 2.
I feel like I've heard of Ankh.
You have to play them. They're so silly
I have to
and
play
they're
Ankh?
so good.
Okay.
They're really cheap
I'll
on
look up
Steam.
Ankh.
They're from the 2000s.
Okay, good. I'll look them up.
So it's Ankh 2 or Ankh 1, Ankh 2, Heart of Osiris, and Ankh 3, Battle of the Gods. They are
Okay.
the most camp game. Camp is literally the only word that I can kind of use to like describe this game. It's funny. They break the fourth wall, and it's just kind of a very
Excellent.
relatively simple task-based storyline, whatever. But the
Okay.
plot is fucking wild, and it gets wilder as the games go on. So
Okay.
the main character is a guy named Asil, and he's living in Egypt, and he's just like a normal guy. That's the other thing I love about this game. There are, besides like Assassin's Creed Origins, there are very little games where you are playing as a normal Egyptian dude or girl. Like you
Right.
are literally
Right.
like, most of the time you're going to be playing as like a pharaoh or somebody with power, and like this is a normal
Or a
dude.
magi or something.
His dad is the architect of the Great Pyramid of Giza and like the Sphinx.
Sick.
And so he and his friends sneak into the pyramid to literally drink. And essentially
Based.
he breaks one of the canopic jars of the pharaoh who's buried in the room they're hanging out in. And
Oh, no.
then the mummy comes alive and curses him, but he is able to pull off this ankh around his neck and essentially save himself. And he becomes like the keeper of this ankh, and he becomes kind of this person who needs to save it. But the entire first game is him trying to get this curse off, and it slowly but surely like is
Right.
encroaching up his arm, and then his arm gets controlled by other things.
Yeah.
And he ends up teaming up with a woman named Tara, and like all these really unlikely characters who he kind of has to like sort of con. And like
Right.
one of the cool parts is that the main villain in one of them is Set, or actually not even Set yet. Set is in the third one. In the first one, Osiris is the villain, which actually I kind of found a little refreshing because for the most part he's not really a person who is villainized. Like he's kind of the hero dude. So I thought it was very interesting.
Right. Sure.
And then they villainize the pharaoh, and I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of like this. This is kind of like he's this huge kind of capitalistic kind of guy who like wants because he had like a private connection with the gods, and that was kind of the whole thing, is that they weren't allowed to like kind of go past that.
Yeah.
And it's funny, it's silly. They break the fourth wall all the time. They make like just these hysterical little jokes. And you go in all these interesting places in Egypt. And in the second one, the Ankh gets stolen, and Asil and his friends have to go and get it back. And then essentially they make an agreement that he will be the keeper of the Ankh. The third one, though, is the one I played most recently, and I wanted to talk about because it's called the Battle of the Gods, and essentially, and the best part is that all 3 of them, they know that there's another game coming, so they talk about the other game, and within the actual
good.
storyline of all 3 games, it happens within a couple weeks. It's hysterical. Like, you really need to play them almost in order, because there will be things that the same characters keep coming back. And like,
Yeah, just playing them like back to back to back.
yeah,
like,
and I
all
didn't
the
do that, and I
jokes.
really should have, because there were a lot of things that carried over that I kind of forgot by the time I would play the next one.
Right.
But essentially, they have to help. They actually discover that the Ankh, Horus, is trapped inside of the Ankh because he lost the Battle
Okay.
of the Gods last time and tried to kill Set. Turns
Oh,
out,
no.
Set kind of set him up to pretend to be killed. And so Horus gets trapped in the Ankh, and he needs Aseel and his friends to help him win the Battle of the Gods. For no reason, I genuinely don't know why. To do the Battle of the Gods, you have to go to the afterlife, or I guess the God plane. I don't even know. It's not even described. When you get there,
not important.
There are 3 sections of this plane. There's the ancient Egyptian section, there's a Mayan section, and there's a Norse section.
Let's go.
And for no reason, you never get to go to the Mayan section, which makes me feel like that they totally like had to scrap that part of the game,
no reason.
And that you never get to go there and see what's going on. But you do at one point get ousted to the Norse section, in which you're hanging out with Thor. And
yeah,
if I remember correctly, I need to make Thor a food. Was it a pizza?
Yep.
Nat, does anyone else remember? I had to
historically accurate Thor is eating.
Yeah. I had to essentially like make it like go around and like very much task based. Like certain people wouldn't let me do things until I gave them something else, and like kind of going around this little world and stuff. But it was so random, and Aseel truly never acknowledged it. And never acknowledged that he was in a really weird place.
Oh my god.
So you had to get him food, then you had to get him a helmet, and then you had to get yourself a helmet and a weapon for Thor to take you seriously. That's what it was.
Excellent. Oh my god.
Yeah, it was completely random.
True to character.
To be
honest.
Oh, a drink. Yeah, it was. I think I had to get him.
It had to have been a drink. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah, it was. It's like the best game.
That is super silly.
It's so silly and weird. And the only thing that was like because I honestly kind of thought about it a little bit, that like obviously there's mummies who come alive and the gods you're talking to and stuff, but like if you take away all of that, it kind of was weirdly accurate, because it just showed like him like going around like an ancient Egyptian town, and there was a guy who made clothes, and there was a guy who was a fruit seller. There also was a slave master, which got a little iffy, but like technically was probably correct. The weird part was that he was best friends with the last slave he was trying to sell, and it was just like there's weird shit going on.
That's just.
But the big thing was that they used the modern names of all these ancient Egyptian cities. So he lives in Cairo.
Yeah.
And there's a theme song as well to all of the games, and it's called This is Cairo. It's a banger. It is so good. Yes. We always talk about how good I actually think we need to make it a sound alert, because it is such a good song.
It just goes really hard for no reason.
It's so bad because it's this is Cairo, and I'm like, no.
So there I know another archaeology game with an absolute banger of a soundtrack.
Oh my gosh, yes. We need to
and
know.
this one may be exposing me. The game is called C14 Dating, and it's an anime dating sim.
It's on my list. It's the things we're going to talk
archaeologists. The game goes hard. It is so accurate.
It is
like,
so
you legitimately,
accurate. It is
They
boring.
do a really good job.
It is so.
They do a really good job.
Have you ever won
the archaeology?
Have you ever won that game?
No, I have not won.
No,
it's so good. The main song is
amazing.
Fire.
You're totally
and I wanted to download it and add it to my list, but I got DMCA'd because the guy is super strict about the soundtrack, and he won't and he's like very militant about his copyright with the music.
Oh my god!
And I'm like, that sucks, because the song is so good.
That was my.
Did I play that off stream? No, I didn't. I didn't play C14 Dating off stream.
I have played. This was another thing I was going to talk about when I talk about like archaeology games. It is the most accurate archaeology game I've ever played. So much so that it is boring.
It is. Yeah, I agree with you.
Because there are parts that go way too deep into Neanderthal like history and caving.
Yep.
And I played it twice.
Like stratigraphies, like drawing stratigraphy maps of like geological formations, and I'm like, I don't even do this at my real job because I hate it.
I'm literally like it. So I played this twice. We played this for 2 Valentine's Day. The first Valentine's Day I streamed.
I also did it for a Valentine's Day stream. Yes.
We lost. We lost both times. We never ended up with anybody. It is an impossible game, and that's the only reason it's I hate it, because literally I think you have to honestly, like, we are probably going to play it, not this February probably because I'm going to Egypt around that time, but like,
Right.
I'm going to play it again, but we're going to have to pick a person first and actually like
And just
cheat
commit.
and follow.
So now
all
here's the
things.
hard question then.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I was literally, I'm
who's
not
the
even joking
one?
you. I have notes about this because this was like
Yes.
one of the things I was going to do. So there are 4 potential suitors and potentially a 5th, but it was never truly clear if you
Okay,
could get.
yeah.
So I don't really know any of their names, but I have. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, it is also one of the best video games I've ever seen to represent disability in a video game, because there's a person without an arm. There's my character has
Someone in a wheelchair, right?
There's not someone in a wheelchair, but somebody is deaf. One of the main
That's
guys you
what
can
it
fall
is,
in love
yeah.
with is deaf. One of
Yeah,
the other
somebody
guys
has to sign.
doesn't have an arm. He has a prosthetic arm.
Prosthetic.
And then our character, I think, is diabetic or something. There's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, she has something going on.
so it's like the most wild thing. But pretty much you have the moody Mr. Darcy type character, deaf archaeology wizard. Like, he has been working at the dig for so long. He really wants to get hired, but they don't like his like kind of personality. He's kind of like dark.
Yep,
Like, he'll just
I
turn
remember.
off his hearing aid. He's like your unit partner. So like he's in the
Yep,
unit
yep,
right
yeah.
next to you. I thought maybe one day we would go with that route, but we were kind of iffy because he's just kind of rude and I don't really like that.
He is kind of a dick.
Then there's the really nerdy kid who loves video games but is really quiet, and I think is an artist. I think wants to be an artist, because that's like
He's one of the sketch
the
artists.
best part about this game is that it super represented how field schools worked, where like for the most part not everyone really wanted to do archaeology.
Yes.
And there
They
also
were there for
potential
other things.
of people falling in love, because that did happen on my field school in other circles that I was like, what the heck is going on? This is wild.
Right.
So yes, there's the really nerdy kid. There's the assistant, essentially professor, who is a geologist.
Yeah, that's bad.
He was my favorite
that's-
though.
I mean, that's the problem. He's the favorite, but
He's
but
the
you can't
favorite.
because
He just makes rock jokes.
the implied power dynamic struggle is
But he was
extremely problematic.
he was the best, most well-rounded of all of them. That was, I think, the second time I played it, that was our main person. He made rock jokes, rock puns all the time, and he was just so like kind.
My favorite
and
was the
funny.
himbo.
And then there was the himbo, and he was the
And
first.
then
And the first time I played it, he was my main. I love that.
The rugby playing himbo.
The rugby
oh my
playing,
god.
like, British dude who lived in New Zealand for too long. My favorite thing was
Yeah.
that, like, constantly what it would do, he would go like this.
Yeah.
And I was always like, why did he do that? And somebody, when I was playing the game in my chat, was from fucking New Zealand and was like, that's
Yeah.
something that we do. And then he also
Yeah.
would say, cool as. Cool as is a thing
cool
that New
as.
Zealanders
Yeah.
say. And I literally was like, are you telling me that, like, they did all this, like, actual research to, like, do,
Yeah, they
like,
did
all of
cultural
this?
research.
Yeah,
It's
he
insane.
was
The himbo's my favorite.
he was the first one that I went for, and he failed out halfway through the excavation, had to stay for the rest
Yeah.
of it. The other thing is that I think, I never got full confirmation, is I think you could technically romance the Belgian girl who spoke no English.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, there
that's
was
what I
there
thought.
was a girl option. There was
Yeah.
a girl option.
I never like got full confirmation, but
She
there
was like
just,
redhead or something.
Yeah, she was a redhead. But yeah, it is the most accurate game about archaeology ever.
Yeah.
And yet it is
I think the big
impossible to
reason-
play. And it got boring in the very beginning, especially when I played it the second time. We skipped.
Yeah.
And the mini games are so goddamn hard. And
The
technically
mini games
you can
are a legitimate challenge.
you can skip them, but I found out that when I did it the second time, I skipped them. It hinders you. You don't even like
Yeah.
it doesn't even help you.
You don't pass.
You don't pass it, and it's just like it was like
Yeah,
one of the most
it's a problem.
difficult games.
It's so hard. The combination of difficulty and the other thing that made me not finish was that when the game started playing, I instinctively started reading out everyone's lines.
Yes.
and I picked a different accent for every person.
I also did
and
that.
then there were like more and more characters that kept coming out. So the guy said he was from New Zealand. I'd be like, all right, good day there. We're going to go out there and we're going to dig up them holes. And then I started having these accents for all the characters. And then I got exhausted from having to maintain the accents and keep track of who had what accent. And I was like, oh my God, this is why I'm not a voice actor.
I don't think I did all of them, but anytime the French professor talked, I would go into my French accent. Because that's
you go super hard on the French accent. You have to. It's so funny.
That was the one I felt most comfortable like doing, and like, but I did like give nuances to different characters and stuff. But like the game was literally meant for me because the main character's name is Melissa. Like, absolutely,
so that
like
works for you.
It blows my mind that the best archaeology game is like one of the hardest games, and it's also a dating sim on top of it. Like, somebody just really cared about art. Like, it's obvious that they talked. It's obvious that they went on a freaking field school. Like, there's so many things.
They legitimately did the archaeology. They knew what they were doing.
It's just absolutely wild. I can't even believe that you played this, because
it was so fun. It was so trash.
It was so
such a trash
fun
game.
and hard. And one day we will play it, but we will be fully cheating and following a walkthrough. Because it's unacceptable that I played that twice and didn't get a guy on either one. It's unacceptable. Like, just that. But yeah, that was one of the funny, like, man. Honestly, that was the main thing that I talked about when I had in my section about archaeology games. And
it was C14 dating.
It's C4 because it's the only good one. I hate to say it.
Unacceptable condition. Unacceptable.
It really is the only, because unfortunately, and you know this, and this is not just in video games. Every other game in which there are archaeologists are just treasure hunting games.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you're not an archeologist. You're not really meant to learn. Like I can name so many of them. Like Forewarned is the one that I was talking about before, where like they had the cuneiform on the sarcophagus, and I put it, even though it is an Egypt themed game. It's,
one of the Forewarned devs. Tell them I love the game. Yeah. It's so much fun.
So Silver Sunset is she's the mod on their one of the mods on their Discord and stuff.
Okay. I love that game.
We play with her all the time. It's so good. It actually has gotten so much better. We recently played on Halloween, and it had been pretty much a year since I had played on it. And the updates they've meant since last Halloween have made me want to play.
I agree. I also played it on Halloween, and it was so good.
They've done so many good updates, both visually and also just like to help with the game and the challenges. Like we played on Tuesday and we're gonna play tomorrow at the end of the stream, and those weekly challenges have really helped. And because I didn't really, before, the prestige points were not like attractive to me. Like it just didn't seem like something I could achieve, but like these seemed easier. But like Forewarned is about treasure hunters destroying a tomb, especially now that they've added dynamite. And like we all make.
What do you mean?
Jokes.
Dynamite is a well-documented archaeological tool.
Yeah. The sarcasm we use in the game is very large, and the thing that I always say is, like, whenever I have to like kill a mummy because he's attacking me, I said, if a mummy did actually come alive and attack me, I am going to destroy it. I am going to throw historic preservation out the window because I want to save my own life. Please. Yeah, Heinrich Schliemann for video games.
The Schliemann effect.
But yeah, it's like every other game. Like I think Forewarned does a good enough job about talking about ancient Egypt. It's improved. Like it did have a lot of really bad stuff at the very beginning, which were just like not accurate and stuff. But like it does have. They now have used like real images of stuff. There's like a little Book of the Dead image that's like the Book of Ani from the British Museum. So like you see those things, and also about half of the rare artifacts that you can collect are real, which is really cool.
That is.
They're not always in the right proportions. The Rosetta Stone is a little small, but like it's about half of them are real objects. Though they aren't labeled as such, which I wish they did. I wish they labeled them as real things, because like there's the statue of the couple, the man and the woman sitting next to each other, and that's at the Met, and that's a very famous statue. It's really very detailed, and I wish that they kind of just like actually said the name of it rather than, I think it's called like the Lover's Portrait or something, like just these kind of general names. But yeah, it's like, we understand you don't want the boring archaeology. Actually,
I made a joke about the treasure hunting stuff in archaeology recently. Top Gunner referenced it there. So I play a lot of role play games.
Yeah.
Not like role playing games, but like role play servers on games.
That's cool.
So like essentially like D&D campaigns in a video game. You make a character, it's a custom character, you do a voice, you do all this stuff. So recently I was playing on a Red Dead Redemption 2 roleplay server.
I was hoping you were going to talk about this because I do love this.
Did you see that? You know what I'm referencing?
Oh, yeah.
So I have a recurring character on my roleplay servers. His name is Dr. Thaddeus Horngard, and he's an archaeologist, and he's an excuse for me to make archaeology jokes. He's just an old man who does really questionable archaeological methods, and so the Red Dead iteration of him. He always uses my stereotypical old man voice, and I just kind of talk with a wheeze. And so on Red Dead, what I was doing was I made an archaeologist, and I would go grave robbing. And then when the police showed up, and they were like, "Sir, you're committing an actual crime," I'd be like, "No, this isn't a crime. It's science, boy. Sit down. I'm doing archaeology." Absolutely. And he's like, "No, pretty sure you can't do that." I'm like, "Yes, just let me be. Here, look at the stratigraphy." And then in the TikTok that you're thinking of, I had a permit on hand. They were like, I was like, "Oh, somebody told me that I would need to show you a permit. So here you go." And I handed him a piece of paper that just said, "I can do what I want, Dr. Thaddeus Horngard."
Absolutely.
And he was like, "Yeah, that looks good to me, man."
Absolute Ron Swanson moment. Amazing.
So I have a lot of stuff that I never got to turn into videos from that character. Mm-hmm. But there's more to the story of Dr. Thaddeus Horngard.
Oh my God. I love it.
I ended
Oh no.
Because somebody told me that they heard that a bank had stolen a bunch of archaeological artifacts and hidden them in their vault.
Okay.
So Thaddeus wanted to liberate the artifacts from the vault and from all the looters.
Yes.
So he blew up the vault with a couple of bank robbers and robbed the bank.
Love it.
And then I ended up, this is actually insane that they did this, but they added in a metal detecting mod, which you take a survey like lantern and you go out and you walk and you do pedestrian survey.
Wow.
Like you pace like transects and then you find a thing and it's like ding ding dig here, and then you dig up like an artifact. Mm-hmm. And when you collect the full set of artifacts, you can bring it to like a collector who will buy the set.
Love it.
And so what I ended up doing was I worked and I opened a custom business with the game. It was the County Historic Preservation Office.
Wow.
And I opened a preservation office in one of the towns. They set it up in the mayor's office, and I had a custom little shop where like there was a librarian in there where people could buy and sell books. You could buy and sell these artifacts. Amazing. And he basically like I would hold lectures where people would come by and I'd be like, "Come along, we're gonna learn about archaeology." And I would take a bunch of people online playing a video game, like pretending to be cowboys, and they would come follow this old man as I hobbled around a town and be like, "If you look at this structure here, it's got some Greek colonnades. You're going to want to know the difference. Colonnades are attached to the structure, whereas columns are separated. So it's a subtle difference, but you'll pick up on it. Come on." And I would just like random facts.
Yeah.
Like random facts about stuff, or like, "Oh, we're going to dig up. Do you guys know the 3 types of dirt?"
Yes.
There's clay, silt, and sand, and all dirt is some composition of these 3. And they would be like taking notes. I would ask questions at the end. I legit just taught archaeology to a bunch of random people on the internet as a cowboy.
That's so good.
And that was, I think, one of the weirdest experiences. That server unfortunately had to close down.
Oh.
But I am bringing Thaddeus back to a new. I'm bringing him back on Ark Survival Evolved. Tomorrow night is the launch of a new campaign with a server that I've been playing with for a very long time. So Thaddeus is coming back. He's a dwarf and he's a necromancer.
Oh.
And so what he does is he raises the dead specifically to ask them about socio-political climates. Yes! And also what this object is, and just holding some random thing.
I'm not even joking you. If I have the opportunity to do another D&D campaign, I might might be a necromancer. I'm literally.
You might do ethical necromancy.
That is such a great.
Ethical necromancy is a very good route.
That is such a great idea. Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's so amazing.
But an archaeologist who uses necromancy to find out contemporary ancient cultural questions.
You know that if we had the ability to actually ask people back then a question about something, we would 100%.
There would be so many rules. And the one caveat that I do give him so that I don't get in too much trouble is he does respect cultural norms. So if there is a culture that has very strong opinions about sanctity of the dead and they verbally tell him, please don't raise that corpse, that's against our culture, he won't do it.
Yeah.
However,
if there's no rules,
there is implicit consent, which is not a great way to lead it, but he's also not a perfect man.
No.
Thaddeus is not a good aligned character. He is a neutral aligned character.
I literally
and so he's one of my favorite little buddies to play in these games. And it just kind of draws a new question of how role-playing games in that sense, and like even D&D can be such a weird and interesting way to push the conversation of archaeology forward and draw people into that subject. Because like I said, I just accidentally ended up being teacher to like a bunch of people. And in this new server, this new game starting up this week, I'm already getting folks being like, hey, are you going to teach classes? Because your character is like it's like an ex-university professor. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll teach classes. So it's like, I'm basically, which might sound bad because I don't have a certification. It's kind of freelance teaching, but at the same time, like it's better than nothing.
No.
And it's getting people thinking about archaeology in a context where they otherwise would never have. In a video game, they're playing a game and they're having fun doing it.
You literally brought up the best thing. So people on my stream know this, and it is not going to happen for a long time. But I have been wanting to write my own D&D or RPG campaign centered around ancient Egypt as an educational tool that people can take and play to learn about Egypt. And and I've been wanting to do it. I even picked what RPG platform to use because it's something called what is it called? Scion, which is Ruben Mad Hatter, who's a streamer here that does a lot of RPG stuff. We had like a talk, and he kind of educated me on a couple different ones, because my whole thing is that I want to do it in ancient Egypt, but I don't have the mental capacity or energy to add dwarves and gnomes and elves into ancient Egypt as well. And so I was like, I need a human-based, essentially, like world. And and that's it might get adapted and stuff. This was something that we were just gonna play myself on we were gonna stream it and then potentially whatever. The whole big thing is that Scion is essentially like kind of like Percy Jackson, in which you are like demigods and children, but they use like all of the pantheons, and I mean all.
Smush them all.
There's like there's an Egyptian pantheon, there's a Norse pantheon, there's the Greek and Roman pantheons, there's a there's like I think a Native American one as well, and then there's, not even joking you, an American pantheon where Uncle Sam is a god.
Yes, I was hoping you were going to say that.
Like Uncle Sam, I think it's Uncle Sam. I think Betsy Ross is included. I think Paul Bunyan
White Jesus
is too. I don't know. I can't remember the other ones, but
if White Jesus isn't in there, they're doing it wrong.
That is true. But like there's a whole thing, and so the whole plot of it was that a group of people who don't know that they are demigods, very similar to like the beginning of Percy Jackson, go on a tour of the Metropolitan Museum of Art or a museum, and get whisked away by a tour guide that turns out to be probably one of the gods, one of the Egyptian gods, and they get sent back in time and essentially have to make their way out, and going through and like trying to pick a time period and like and doing all that stuff, and like a long essential thing like that. But it's like I want to have something like that can teach you about history, but then also just like free reign, man. Cool. Like and
an ultimate archeo game.
Yeah. And the other thing
I will say, Tears of the Kingdom. Did you play Tears of the Kingdom?
No, I haven't.
that one goes really hard on the archaeology. Like there's an archaeological site, there's a historic society
Yeah,
in the game,
I know.
and they like stop you from going in. They're like, this is an active excavation, my guy. You can't come in here.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I respected it. I left. I haven't gone there. I never
funny.
went back. They were like, hey, sorry, we're doing some work here. You can't come in. I was like, oh, all right. And I just just left. I was like, hey, they're busy. They're doing their job.
busy. The other thing is that
There's
in the-
probably main quest stuff there. I'll deal with it. I'll deal with it later. Yeah.
The other thing is
Tears
in
of the Kingdom had no business going so hard on it. The Middle English Hyrulean is so cool.
Yeah.
I mean, they had no reason to go that hard on it, and they
Yeah,
did,
do.
and I respect them for it.
Absolutely. The other thing that is in the works in the next couple months is that now they have added archaeology to Minecraft, and we have been
Yes.
wanting to start a Minecraft server of archaeologists.
Let me know.
Myself and
100%, I'm in.
Yeah, we're in. I've been wanting to do it for so long, and then it was gonna be amateur archaeologist was gonna do it, then I was gonna do it, and then
Yeah.
and we're hoping if amateur
Well,
gets
give me the link
partner-
when it drops.
if she gets partner, then she can make stream teams, and then she kind of wants to do like a whole thing
Oh.
with like gathering all these
would be
archaeologists
huge.
to be able to do stuff, and that would be one of the things that we could do.
That would be amazing.
But yeah, we've been wanting to do that forever.
Yeah,
because
I'll ask my
tested it.
4-year-old for tips. He's way better at Minecraft than me.
I
No, you
This
think
is the
I'm
joke.
kidding?
no.
4-year-old at my computer. Did you know you can make ink on signs glow? You can make glow in the dark
No.
signs. Yeah, you know who knew that? My 4-year-old. I came down. It was nighttime. I'm like, what the hell is going on with that sign? And I went, and my wife's like, oh yeah, I guess it's a glow in the dark sign. I'm like, what do you mean?
Oh, glowing
And I watched him. He
from the
made it.
glow squids.
Yeah, you
okay,
use glow
yes.
squid ink, and
Yeah.
he makes a glow in the dark.
The
I'm
whole
like, are you kidding me?
the whole joke is that we used to stream Minecraft occasionally because I have a friend of mine who created an entire ancient Egypt Minecraft server that is like
Very
has
cool.
recreated ancient Egyptian monuments that you're supposed to excavate.
Sure.
Very, very cool. But then the way that I play Minecraft is all I do is map. I do nothing. I don't go in mines. I'm too scared
That's my
of them.
wife.
I just map. And I have a temple. Like my house is a pyramid. I have a separate temple that just has my map. And the map is enormous. Because I don't want to
That's
add
great.
a mod where I just automatically map. I have to have that struggle where I have to go through
Yeah.
and map everything.
Yeah, you
I
gotta
literally
get there.
stumbled upon a woodland mansion just by accident. Like I literally was
So
like,
good.
"What's that big brick thing?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, that's a woodland
Oh
mansion."
man.
Carefully
super
walk
rare
around it
spawn.
so that it gets on the map, and then never go back. Like,
Yeah.
like I am a absolute scaredy cat. All I do is map and go on sunken ships, which makes a lot of
Yep.
sense because that's like I
For
don't
sure.
need to do the fighting. I don't need to do anything like that. That's all I do. There's one briefly one that I'll mention because I know you want to get going. Have you ever heard of Treasure?
Yeah, I've hit all my topics, but that's fine. Go ahead.
Have you heard of Treasure Hunter Simulator?
Yes, I have it in my Steam wish list. I have Treasure Hunter Simulator. I have Monuments Builder. I have all of those weird little niche ones that are basically
Yeah.
Power Washing Simulator. But yeah,
So Treasure Hunter Simulator is awful. It's a metal detecting game. It has, but I will say it's in my okay section because it's not
okay,
horrible. Because
it doesn't try to be.
The one
Yeah.
thing with Treasure Hunter Simulator that they did a very good job at is that when you find artifacts, they give you a lot of information about them. Like, I don't know how accurate they are because
That's
there's
good.
like they're not.
Yeah, you can't fact check everyone.
Yeah, I can't fact check everyone, and they're from different. It kind of is. You're almost like you're almost like contracted out. Like essentially, like tasks will come
Okay.
in your email, and then you can pick.
Yeah, you're a
which one you
subcontracted
go.
metal detectorist.
Yeah, and so like the only two that I went to was like one in like Europe, and so I was finding like both World War I and World War II, and then occasionally like older stuff, and then there was one Civil War one that I did. I've looked at some photos
Yeah.
on the Steam, and it looks like there are ones in like, I'm gonna assume Egypt. It's a desert area, so it could be either. But
Right.
it was really good at like kind of you'd find the object, you'd click on it, and then it would give you like a lot of information and the time periods it's coming from.
Sure.
The other problem though is that you are kind of prompted to sell them. Oh. Oh. And I refused to do it. The
Oh,
couple
yeah.
streams
Oh,
I did,
yeah.
I'm like, no. We're hoarding all of this. We're not selling anything. The only thing
Yeah.
we sold was the trash that we would find, like the bottle cap things and like things
Yeah.
that were like so recent that I'm like, nah.
I got around that on the Red Dead server by being incredibly gullible. So when I went to the pawn shop owner who had been arrested 6 times and I asked him if he had a reputable source for me to hand some artifacts over to, he's like, "Oh yeah, I got a guy. He works in a museum up like, north of this town. He'll take real good care of him." I'm like, "Oh, excellent. Here you go." It's
Yeah, exactly. It's and
nothing
so
like doing some history for a
it's
nominal
actually
fee.
quite a beautiful game, and it's very peaceful because nothing really happens. Like you're kind of just
Yeah,
you kind of just are
find
wandering
stuff.
in these very beautiful little areas, and it kind of gives you some information, and it gives you some information about the place. And you kind of have this like very similar to like the Forewarned like office space that you start in. It's very similar, like the kind of dark academia thing. The only thing I remember from the game really though is that there was a painting in your office that was like this little girl kind of, and I remember there's a clip of it of me, and it's so funny because I was taking a sip of my wine and I was like, that painting's kind of creepy, and as I'm taking a sip of the wine, I'm staring at the painting, blood just drips down the entire painting, and I go, "Ugh," and I like was absolutely the most it was so scary for no reason. It was like, did not make any sense.
Cozy metal detecting game, just like
We're getting
lo-fi
out of
music
here.
in the background, and then don't be nod.
We're getting out of here. Yeah, it was okay. I think
That's
it
so
gave
funny.
a decent amount of information, but yeah, it just perpetuates the idea that like you can just take shit and sell it.
Yeah.
And then the only one that I had labeled as bad was because it's just a bad quality game, not because it really is bad about archaeology.
Okay.
It's called Archaeology X.
Oh no.
This was one of the first games I ever played, and I think that video of me playing it is still up on YouTube because I did upload the whole thing. It was quite literally the worst game I've ever played in my life. It really tried. It really tried so hard to actually kind of simulate digging, sort of, where you were this tiny little character in this desert world that kind of had pyramids but kind of wasn't, but like kind of was, and you had a little tent and you had a camel and you get to run around, and then you would dig. You'd have to click each time you wanted to dig, and you would see the ruins of like a house. You'd see the outline, and you'd be digging, and the sand would go, and the sand would kind of move behind you.
Cool.
But then it just took forever. And I was like, I'm playing an archaeology game because I wanted to be archaeology, not because I want to actually be in the field digging for weeks on end.
Yeah, right. It's too real. Rain it in.
It's too real. And then for the most part, it was so glitchy. I got stuck in a mountain. I got literally, I tried to climb a little bit of this mountain, and then I fell behind it and then got stuck and could not get out. And then I found a pyramid, and I was like, it's obviously a pyramid. It's buried up to here but with sand, but I found a pyramid. Let's find the entrance. Right. I sat there for
Didn't
hours.
exist.
For so long. It's just one of the worst quality games I've ever played in my life.
Oh God.
When it had a lot of actual potential, I literally thought it was going to be great. I thought it was going to be great.
Right.
And it was really bad.
Well, that's disappointing.
But yeah, those are the only ones that I was going to talk about. But yeah, the archaeology games in general are just, I expect nothing less than
the ones that are like catered specifically towards it, it's always like it's a weird funny little niche where like you have to balance how much like actual meticulous science you're doing versus like how much of the fun and adventure you want to capture. And I feel like I'm a lot more forgiving of things after 3 years of streaming games and just like playing through one after the other and learning what they're like and being like, again, tying into the games themselves shouldn't be the educating tools. They should trigger the education.
Absolutely.
So if you're playing something and you're saying, I want to learn more about these people that I just played in this game, or that was kind of cool, but like, is that really how it's done? Or, all of those questions that people are going to ask, people who wouldn't normally have done that, people who normally don't see that content.
Yeah.
And then they see the stuff that we're doing, playing these different games, and that's making them go, I want to learn more about that time period of history, or I didn't know that was a thing. That's pretty cool. That's, I think, where the value of Archeo gaming comes in. That's where I think the public outreach connection
you need that outreach connection, because otherwise,
like it or not, archaeology is an incredibly public facing business. It might be like a weird thing to say straight up, but like we only exist because the public has an interest in the stuff that we do.
Absolutely.
If people didn't care about archaeology, you can bet your keister the government isn't going to pay us to do it for no reason. Like they do it because there is the public interest there. So when people have reasons and excuses to engage with archaeology and to take an interest in the subjects that we're learning about, that's, I think, where like we get a real benefit out of that, not just as people in the business of archaeology and wanting to preserve those sorts of artifacts, but just kind of culturally on a whole level where we're learning more about ourselves and our past, where we came from, where we're going.
Very much so.
And all of that. So that's kind of where, you know, that's why I consider archaeology public outreach to be so important, and why I think archaeogaming is such a great vector for that.
Yeah, it was something that always I was going to do the general, like going to go through the PhD program and do the whole 9 yards of what I thought you had to do to become an Egyptologist. And it literally was, ironically, the place that I work now is an archaeology museum that is very public facing, and we do lots of lesson plans and lots of stuff about the history of our city. And I did an internship with them in between my 2 years of grad school, and that changed the whole entire trajectory of my life, in which I was like, I don't think I want to do this PhD. Like, I wanted to be teaching, and I know that there's the ability that as a college professor, you kind of have a little bit more flexibility than in some cases to kind of teach what you want or teach in the style that you want. But the more I was just like, I can't go through 6 years of this and like not feel like I'm living, like I was dying in 2 years. And so like the ability that I just wanted to be able to talk to people and just be able to talk in kind of, I use the word lay kindly, but like lay people, non-archaeology people. And like,
I know that too.
The biggest thing is like when I did my thesis, the number one thing I wanted to do was that I wanted to be able to go to any single person, academic, non-academic, child, and describe what I studied and them think that is cool. That was literally the lowest consideration, which is why I did it on depictions of ancient Egyptian dogs. And because people are like, oh, they had dogs?
That's
I'm like,
fun.
Yeah, they had named dogs, they had corgi type dogs, they had these types of dogs. I mean, like I could just talk about it forever, because it's like, I love my fellow cohorts, but they were talking about like a very specific one image on one tomb wall and deep diving into the theory behind it, and I'm like,
the hyper specialization of archaeology is a whole thing.
It's a whole. It's a whole.
It's a whole.
As I say all the time,
it is.
To be an archaeologist, you have to dig yourself into a hole, and then you actually have to dig yourself into another hole, and then another hole. And especially, like, I find there are certain specialties in archaeology that allow you not to go as deep. Egyptology is not one of them. You tend to have to have a hyper specialty.
A few layers.
You have to be a specialty on this type of pottery from this specific time period from this specific city. Like, it's things like that. That's how people will know you, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so people ask me my specialty all the time, and I'm like, dogs. Sorry, I don't really have one. Like, I don't. Like, I know more things about the New Kingdom than I do about any other kingdom, but that's kind of common. Most Egyptologists will say that because it's when we get the most information coming from it. So
we had option A, which was take like 4 to 6 years of debt worth of school to get that PhD program, or option B, we could stream on Twitch and teach people for free. Let's go. We don't have the qualifications, but we make it work, baby.
Absolutely. You
fake it till we make it on the internet.
I mean, slowly but surely, I am making money, and slowly but surely,
that's what you do.
That's what it is. We're busy like crazy, but one day I'm hoping that this will be a full brand. And stuff.
And that's what it's all about. You just gotta, you just, as long as we are doing our little bit. And having fun.
The Egyptologist pyramid scheme is that you learn about Egypt, you can't get a job, so then you teach people about Egypt, and it's a pyramid scheme. It's it's like, it's a joke, but it's not a joke. Like I hate to say it, it's not a joke. Like,
I know.
But yeah, I mean, that's why I'm so glad I've met so many cool history, STEM, and streamers and people.
It's been wild.
And
It's
people
been
on
good.
TikTok,
And I appreciated having this talk today. This was a really fun. This was a
Yeah.
really fun conversation. A really good discussion on.
And that's why
everything,
I always wanted to do these things, because I wanted this. Funny enough, I wanted this to be an opportunity for say students to be able to almost essentially present one of their papers if they were nervous and
Right.
wanted to do it to
Yeah,
just
yeah.
a public forum. I wanted that to be
sure.
this, but now I'm just so glad that I've been able to to do it with Beyond the Nile, is that I'm bringing in people from totally different specialties,
Yeah.
and we're learning so many different things, and I love that, because
Yeah.
I love archaeology, but you have to specialize in it. You can't learn everything about every time period. And
Yeah.
that pisses me off, because I
I
would
do
love to
feel
go
I do feel
excavate
bad. Literally just last night, I had a guy come in because what I try to do is I have this archaeology fun fact redeem
Oh yeah.
where people can channel point redeem, and I'll tell them a fun fact and they can pick the subject. And I don't know why I said pick the subject, because people are always I had a guy last night come in and he's like, hey, I need to know about 8th or 9th century Bulgaria. And I was like, oh no.
Do you know what my fun fact system is? Because my fun fact system was so bad that people were asking me for a fun fact and I couldn't think of anything. So my fun fact system is that I have this book and I tell them to pick a
that's cool.
number, and they're simple facts, but then
That's cool.
I'll take that number and I'll expand upon it, or say
So
it's
the way
accurate.
I get around it, which I found has been pretty successful, is if you don't know what they're asking you about, tell them that straight up,
Yeah, it's also,
and then go find an answer together.
yeah, that is also,
And that's
yeah.
kind of what you do.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, boy, I don't know anything about that, but we can
But-
Google it, and
And I love
I can
that.
show you
That's-
some reputable sources that maybe will help answer the question.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of because that's, I think, as much of a fun fact as actually hearing something straight up. I've told the Viking onion soup as a form of medical triage fun fact about 17 times on my channel, because people repeatedly ask for it over and over again,
Yeah.
and they think it's fun, and new people come in and it's a good one to fall back on. And then there are plenty of other times where people will ask me about 8th or 9th century Bulgaria, and I'm like, well, let's do a search, let's look around at some cool places, and maybe then we both learn something, and
Yeah.
I can add it to the old workaround. So
That's
it's a
true.
fun and compelling way to kind of do that, but it's also a trust building thing
Yeah,
where there's no elitism, there's no big archaeology
yeah.
of spitting it. I don't know what that is, and I will tell you that. I'm not afraid to say that I
Very
don't
true.
know something, and let's find that out together. And that's, I think, an important element of trust building with
Yeah.
archaeologists,
No, very
which is
true.
something that for some reason we're losing. We're losing trust with people, and that's something that needs to come back. People can't be afraid to be wrong or not know something, which I think a lot of folks are sometimes. So
Imposter syndrome. Yeah.
basically,
Me all the time,
Right.
because with my imposter syndrome and then truly my literal learning disability when it comes to my memory, kill me every time. It's just
Yeah.
I always am terrified that I don't know something, and then and it's just I would love to not have that, and that's why I'm very
Yeah.
grateful for I do have people who know these things more specifically and have that kind of brain knowledge to be able to keep all the exact names of each and every pharaoh and all of that, because sometimes
Right.
I do.
Right.
And Alex is my
hard.
greatest. She is my Googler. If I say I don't
Yeah,
know
it is
something,
hard.
Alex will immediately go find it and then put it in the chat, and I'm like, thank you, Alex. This is great.
Yeah, my first two mods on my two of my three mods that were my first mods on my channel. One's my wife, who's also an archaeologist and an
Yeah.
architectural historian, and one is another one of our archaeologist friends.
There you go. Yeah.
So I'm like, I gotta keep a couple on hand.
Yeah, and we have a good amount of people who are very knowledgeable of ancient Egypt and have done a lot of independent research and stuff, and so
Yeah.
it's always helpful to have them, because I'm just I always am oh, the harem conspiracy. Which Ramses was that again? I don't remember the number.
Yeah.
It's 3. I remember it now, but it's things like
Ramses
that. It could, yeah.
Ramses.
exactly.
Which Ramses?
It
You
could
know,
be
the
any-
Ramses.
The whole thing is technically none of them actually had numbers attached to their names, so I say Ramses, I'm technically correct.
That's true.
It's only based on Egyptologists having to add the numbers to know the difference between
Yeah.
them. So, but yeah, it's always good to have. I mean, yeah, you're right. The public perception of archaeology is just, God, go in the freaking toilet, and I'm just please. we allow jokes, but nothing, no serious, no serious.
Yeah, nothing else.
All these weird things and such, but it's so great. It's so great to have such a great Archeo game. I need to be better at the Archeo gaming on their Discord. I'm so bad at.
Oh, the Discord's fun. We have a good time. Well, they just added a whole class of students.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, one of the members is teaching a course on, and he's using Archeo Gaming as a final project, and they just added in like a whole mass of his students who are going to be like in there looking for resources for research.
God.
So
Okay.
just poke your nose around in there and see what you find.
I need to be better at going on Discord, talking with people.
That's fine.
Because I have that.
Discords are
and then
hard
you
to keep
have
track of. I have something like 6,000 Discord notifications.
Oh my God.
It's a violent amount.
It's probably that. That's probably the same for me. I probably have a lot of those as well. Well, does anyone have any last questions for Chris? We'll definitely. I mean, this is a great discussion, and I feel like with this we can also do so many on like just other popular media, and this is something that I've wanted to do for a long time because I
if you
used
ever
to
want
love
to
those
talk about
React
another silly
videos.
subject, feel free to reach out.
Yeah.
And if we can fit it in the schedule, then yeah, I'll absolutely swing by and have another chat.
Absolutely, yeah. We're getting around the time that I think we're gonna rope back around to some of the people we had on previously, or I'm gonna send out another mass message to anyone who wants to join.
Nothing wrong with that.
I'm one of those notifications.
Yeah, there we go.
I was gonna say the only one that is immediate now is I think you in the Archeo Gaming thing that probably tagged me.
You do a Beyond the Nile All-Star series. You bring like four top previous guests in.
That is true. I guess I haven't done one. You can do I think up to 5 on guest star. So
yeah, you can bring multiple people.
I think it would be really fun to get a couple other people. I was really bummed because Paleontologizing and Science and Moohoodles, who are all part of the Knowledge Foundation, the Knowledge Fellowship with myself, they all went to TwitchCon and they did a SciComm panel, and I'm like,
cool.
I wanted to go. That'd be great. And I'm like, no, but we should get the archaeologists
TwitchCon's hard.
together. I was like, we should. I just didn't know. If I knew they had done a panel, I would have figured it out and arranged it. I'm like,
so there was a discussion in the Archeo Gaming Discord about potentially doing a TwitchCon panel, and it didn't pan out. I think that a lot of it was hard. And then there was also one about doing an Archeo Gaming panel at SAAs that I don't think panned out. So there was a lot of conference stuff. So
I will.
There's talks, but we can talk about that because I'd be open to that.
Yeah,
we could put something together.
I very much, because that's the kind of thing is that like I'm very close with Paleontologizing and Science and even Moohoodles, but they're like science, and I don't really consider myself science. I know we are social sciences.
Archaeology is science. Technically, it's
technically a science, but the other thing is that like technically like my master's degree is in art history and archaeology, and so I don't really consider myself on the sciencey part of archaeology, like with C14 dating and with like all of that fancy shit. Like I have no idea. I am the look how pretty this is and what it means, and that like I would have felt very out of place in that with all of the sciencey people when I'm like the more whimsical art history kind of. I'm much more about the physical artifacts than any like sort of theory, and that's kind of
sure.
So
that's fine.
But yes. There's lots of different things that we should definitely get together and do, because I mean there's more of us. There's more of us like coming up every day. I also need to participate in the Archeo Gaming Con. Too many things, not enough time to do them. Yes, Ludo, absolutely. I will send you. I have a Google form. I will send you the Google form. But yes,
it's easy.
Very excited. Thank you so much, Chris. I think we are going to wrap up, and I will go find somebody to rate. You're still streaming, aren't you? After this?
Yeah, I was gonna go stream, but I'm not doing anything like archaeology legit. Like we're playing this game Lethal Company, which has been blowing up TikTok, and it's a lot like Forewarned and Phasmophobia.
Oh,
where like you come into a base, it's very polygonal, but like you come into a base, you have like a ship that has a radar where you can see what your team is doing.
Is it the little?
And there's like monsters hiding in the dark.
Orange spaceman. Is that the little orange?
Yes.
Spaceman? Yes.
Yes.
That looks
the little
so
orange
scary.
jumpsuit spaceman. It is super scary. We played last night. I don't think I have laughed harder on stream in my life.
I was
Like,
watching a lot of funny things on TikTok about it. I actually
I probably am gonna post up. I was crying. I was laughing so hard, and so I was like, no, I gotta play again. So I'm hopping on with a few friends now. So you're welcome to stop by if you'd like. But if you would like to visit someone with a lot more educational content, I highly encourage that, because this is gonna be so.
We will go and see who to raid, but we'll if you're streaming, we'll probably pass it on, because Jesus, that game.
Thank you everybody for having me and for
so
listening.
funny.
It was great being here with all of you guys.
Thank you so much, Chris.